And now we are recording. Okay, so the open chat is just that, and especially with fewer people. Now, if anybody wants to turn on their camera that normally doesn't, feel free to do so. We're not going to have any platform issues. So if you want to turn on your camera, jump in and dialogue, um, do so. Does anybody have a opening topic or a discussion that they'd like to fire off with?
Hmm.
Go ahead, Don.
Well, I just wanted to report, I guess, on the last meeting where I had asked for suggestions about how to report on event targets. And a number of suggestions were given. And I found all of those suggestions really helpful. I actually watched the video several times, took notes on them, and prepared some additional templates. In the form of RV that I was taught, these sorts of things were not discussed. For example, move to before the target event, move to the actual target event, move after the target event. And uh, I was a little concerned about actually doing this. I think it was just sort of fear of the unknown, fear it wouldn't work or whatever. But I was really surprised at how effective the techniques were. And I'm still waiting for feedback on the session that I did with those things. I drew a timeline and I used, I think Russell, you had suggested that I could use like a dowsing technique to just kind of like figure out when the date was going to be for the thing. And I marked that in the session. So I just wanted to say thank you. I thought the techniques were very interesting. And I'm really happy that I was able to pick these up here on the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the optimum things about this chat. Everybody has a different perspective, different level of experience, and it's good to hear it all. I write stuff down all the time that I hear from everybody and employ it. I'll share a little story from training. Angela Thompson Smith was my monitor, and there was a target that where the target was dark at the time we were doing the session, and there's so many different opinions on that. So all I can say in regards to myself, I was new, and I think it was basic. So I can't say why I perceived a block to the target, because a lot of people do view things at night, and since then, night didn't seem to make a difference, but in this particular situation it did. So Angela just said, move forward into the next time that it's daylight at the target. And literally, like a light switch, all of a sudden, I started getting sketches and elements of the target. So why that made a difference to me, I can't explain. Maybe I had a mental block, whatever it is. But these movement exercises are brilliant, and you've taken Pam's training, and when she's looking for substantial landmarks in the area and kind of using that clock method, um, some people will use the view from the optimum position to solve the problem. So the movement exercises have been hugely eye-opening and incredibly uh, useful for me. And it's always nice to know that each of us is picking up tidbits here and there, and applying them to make this craft work. And so much of that, each of us has such a unique perceptual system. You can't necessarily just put a cookie cutter and say this works for you, that works for me, this works for everybody. It just simply is a matter of experimenting, getting educated from multiple points of view. Working with Pam, I found out there were certain problems. CRV was not the right tool. Psychics did a better job in certain areas, and different things like this. So, it's a spectrum we're dealing with. And I, just like you, Don, I appreciate.
There's a confidence thing here. Like, I guess when I was first trained in RV, like sometimes I could do one scan and then I'd go to another page and it would sort of like go completely off. And so the whole idea of asking the question where go before the target, go at the target, go after the target, you need a certain element of confidence and prior success in your session in order to like do this. And I actually found, like, to use the CRV term, it felt like the aperture was opening as I was using these sorts of things. And I was really surprised. The ideograms were like really, detailing the difference between the first thing and the next thing. I was very surprised. So anyway, it's like it added a whole new dimension to my remote viewing that I'm really very excited about. So I really don't want to take up any more time on this because I think I conveyed the notion. But thank you very much.
Well, yeah, no, and it's not a matter of taking up time. The certainty, just simply knowing that this works is a breakthrough that when it happens, you go forward, like you say, with a sense of competence. I remember there was a day where Paul said, "Okay, Russell, are you done proving to yourself this works?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And it's like I would do just enough in a session, say stage 3 or something like this, and this, oh yeah, I got, you know, 3 or 4 things, and now I'm really excited because I couldn't have known those things otherwise. And Paul pointed out, I was literally only reaching far enough to prove to myself it worked. And this was a ways into training. And then it just dawned on me, okay, this does work. Now, what can I do with it? And so a lot of us, because we're ingrained for however many decades it is before we start doing this, oh, this is crazy, it doesn't work, that's non-scientific, blah, 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 blah. So once that realization, and then as you get more positive feedback on your sessions over time, you just sit back, you say, I know this works. Now take the number and get everything out of it because it works. It's not, you're not trying to figure out if it works, you're not trying to prove to yourself it does. Now work it.
Yeah, exactly. You have to build up to it, I guess. You have to like build up to the point where you can like launch off into that next step or whatever. And I guess maybe I have, and these techniques are working, and I am.
You
It's
do
a
have,
it's a new level of amazement, is what it
yes,
is.
and you do have to build up to it. This is something intrinsic, and Daz knows this, and Daz trains his own people this way. It's incremental. You have to have those teeny tiny successes at first, and this where so many people go off into complex remote viewing situations, poor taskings, or this kind of thing, and they don't get those incremental successes. So I did during my training. Daz graciously offered to evaluate, give me blind targets and evaluate. So we did 7 targets. There were things. So I would look at a session and say, "Oh, that's a failure." But when Daz would send it back with notes, look, this was that shape or this. And so right there, I was like, oh, I didn't even see my own success. It had to be pointed out to me by somebody with experience. And that competence building is one of the reasons when a monitor is calling out in session that you don't get negative feedback. You only get positive feedback. And it's the same with gestalts and targets. Paul has you for at least your first year work only water, structure, land. And the importance of those first just stage 1 sessions. They're literally 3-minute sessions. Go do one with Angela, go do one with Paul. And it was stage 1 only. And so then you get to your B, and I would say water, and then they would say site end, meaning that you got the correct gestalt, and then they would show you the feedback of ocean or whatever the primary water target was. Okay. And just by the time you're done with, say, I think we did like 6 of those, 3 with Paul, 3 with Angela, just stage 1. And by the time you say you get 5 out of 6 correct just on your Gestalt, now you've got this foundation, you've got this excitement going to stage 2. And then you do some simple stage 2 targets, quite a number of them. And then you find out, wow, look at this little cluster, look at that little cluster. So your targets have to be built on a gradient, and your successes are built on a gradient. And actually those two interlock. And this is where, I try to tell people, please don't just, go off into this, because if you have an experience, well, I didn't hit anything, or this, that, the other, that's a potential setback depending on the person's psychological tendencies. Okay. So by having DAS, and I remember the very first one, I was in Paul's operational training, and I got my first one. I was checking my email, couldn't wait to see what DAS had to say. And things that I thought were failures that I had already registered and decided were negative, when DAS highlighted, and then I looked, oh crap, that that little thing was this element of the target. The rest of the page was crap, but that thing was there, or this, or how an AOL, so that confidence building and that support from experienced people and doing this on a gradient is hugely important for most of us. There's people that are natural, they can jump and do other things. I'm looking, at the broader spectrum, and the broader spectrum for the highest number of people is, let's just start on a smooth, intelligent gradient and have as many positive feedbacks and interactions as possible. And then, like you say, as you move forward, then all of a sudden this confidence, and I call it certainty. It's like, now I know that I know that I know it. You couldn't beat it out of me. That remote viewing is real.
Yeah.
And even for, maybe almost a year into it, I was still trying to prove to myself that it was real. And if you approach it tentatively, you're going to get tentative results. If you approach it with certainty, there's times you'll absolutely nail the target. And even then there's times where you'll miss, but even a miss then becomes more, less impactful.
Educational.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, now a big miss for me is a good laugh, and B, a good research tool. You know, and speaking of that, before we go next, and Julie, I saw your hand up. Do you still have a question?
Yeah. What's your stage 1? Because I was taught, and I teach, that we don't even use the terminology water and land. We might say landscape, but we say liquid until stage 4.
Well, in Paul's stage 1, it's just basically straight out of the controlled remote viewing manual. That was a combination of all of Ingo's original students plus Skip Atwater. And that was significantly derived from Tom McNear's. So stage 1 is your ideogram. Then you go over to what's we call the A aspect, and you describe the feeling motion, regardless of how the ideogram optically appears. It was curving up, sweeping over, flowing across, angle down. Just try to recount the sensation of having done the ideogram.
Yeah.
Then the second part of the A aspect is the consistency. So that could be fluidity, liquidy, solid, hard, just the consistency. What is it?
So when you say consistency, the terminology we use there is textures. So do you mean textures or not?
No, well, I mean, I suppose in one way they could be, described as a texture, but no, this is a statement of consistency, which ranges, it could be gaseous, energetic, hard, firm, soft, squishy, liquidy, gooey. It's more, what is the, so yeah, you could sense that as a texture, I'm sure, but it's just essentially called consistency. And then B, the way Tom McNear describes it, is your first spontaneous analytical response. In other words, it's the first time you're most likely going to use a noun. In fact, you pretty much are going to use a noun, but it's a spontaneous analytical response. And the difference there for me when I ran into some trouble in that area with Paul, it's like at the moment he could see my mind freeze. And as soon as I've gone, is this land? Is this water? Is this land? He could tell, and he'd say, declare a confusion break. Back in the day, they actually used what was called a miss break. That didn't make it into the CRB manual. Tom still uses miss break. So you could do a miss break or a confusion break because all of a sudden you're oscillating. There's other times where I'll, curving over, sloping down, sharp angle back, and then hard. And before I even think, I write down land or structure or whatever it is. So it's a spontaneous analytical response that results in a noun. And then from there, you move to your S2. So I'm not.
See, when I was trained and how I teach, we're not allowed any nouns until stage 4. Any nouns that come through go on the right hand side. And so even if you can say landscape, but you don't say land. And you never say people. Water, you wouldn't say, you'd say liquid. If you said water, it'd go on the right hand side. And you don't actually, because if you think of perceiving a liquid that's mercury,
right, then
yes, it's liquid, but it's not actually water. And okay, this is basic training, but when you get,
there's variances and nuances to that process. I'm only describing just, because as most people know, I just stick with the book kind of as an originalist. So I just go with the original. Now, is that the right way to go? For me, it is.
I thought I was going with the original, you see. So I've been taught by Mike Webster from Angela, and we were really strictly told we don't use any nouns until stage 4, unless it's just right hand side.
See, and all I can say, and Angela's very, how can I put it, full spectrum. She knows several different modalities and she knows them well. So maybe just that when she was being an assistant instructor for Paul, she taught Paul's way. So what I'm about to say is no disparity, because Angela may have taught another person a different way, or one that she's customized. But when she's working,
but also we don't get into worrying so much as I perceive a lot of the RV community get into these sort of misbreaks and all that sort of stuff. It's like, no, just keep going with the flow. Yes, we'll have some refresh time, but it's like, get up, walk around, come back, get going.
Right.
And it's like I was doing my first ever online bit of training the other day, and the person decided that I'd said AOL Drive. There is no way I'd have said they'd gone into AOL Drive. But if you think in everyday life, you see something and it will spark off other thoughts. Yeah. And so that to me isn't AOL Drive. It's just sparking other thoughts. And usually the monitor, if you're working with a monitor, can perceive that and, right, let's draw you back to this.
Yeah. I do want to finish up the one thing, because when I did the stage 1 sessions with Angela, I used and have effectively been instructed to use water, land, or structure as nouns. So I did that with her and she never corrected me. But again, that could be a principle of her just teaching, because she learned CRV from Paul, teaching Paul's way when she's working with Paul. So what she instructed you, honor that. If somebody's under instruction by somebody else, I tell them, follow your instructor and let that be. So in terms of breaks, I want to rush through a session, and generally everybody does. The breaks, 7 breaks that are available to us, I have found absolutely and utterly indispensable. And recognizing AOL Drive for me took 20 or 30 significant failures before I said, okay, you know what, dang it.
But to me, you talk so much more about failures and AOL Drive and stuff like that, instead of actually everyday life says I see orange as a colour, or I might think of orange as a fruit. And I don't feel we need to go into that. And I mean, the 7 refreshment breaks, we'll work for 20, 30 minutes. If we get to the end of stage 3, then they write the summary up. Then they at least have a walk around, and then we go into stage 4.
Right. And from a different perspective, when I'm in a certain particular stage of a session and I'm linking and the aperture's opening and I'm connecting and I feel myself getting a little woozy and my handwriting's falling apart, I'm not about to take a break unless something's going on that's interruptive of the session. But like I say, Julie, you should absolutely follow your instruction. I'm literally parroting the original manual by Tom, the composite manual by Paul and the other students, and the training I've had with Paul and somewhat with Angela. So the fact that I stick to that is irrelevant to the instruction.
I know, but I've been taught, stick to the structure or be damned. And it's like, well, what is the structure? Because everybody seems to have literally a different structure. And I know the teaching that I do, I get people having incredible viewings, and we really don't need to talk about failures and not. And that's what I still don't understand, because everybody will get something, but it will spark off. It's like I've got 2 brothers, 2 sisters. If they were to tell me about a particular family happening, we all say it differently. And that is real life, let alone remote viewing. But yeah, so I'm just amazed that so many people are so, AOL Drive and
One thing, and I see Daz wants to jump in. We have to remember the output of CRV involved so many disciplines, so many psychologists, hypnotherapists, artists, musicians, physicists, scientific specialties. So they had a particular goal that may be different, than you're saying, this is just real life. Why focus on the negative or what? Okay, they needed to take people with certain tendencies and bring them in a relatively short period of time toward the end. At first, Tom McNair was just with Ingo for 3 years, and achieve a particular goal, which is to provide data points that an analyst could then extrapolate and solve a real world problem. So the strictness of that protocol evolved, first of all, out over many years and many disciplines and many. Ingo did so many trials, you and I probably couldn't count them. So it wasn't arbitrary. They didn't just bring something out of thin air. They would actually get to the end of an experimental stage, and the next stage would start to appear to them somewhat either with some anticipation or unexpectedly at times. And then they would try to take the natural flow of data, information processing, if you will, and follow that flow. They were trying to follow a river. They weren't trying to force anything. So what you see as the output of CRV. Now, if you're interested, both Tom's and the composite manual with Paul and Ingo's other students are available for free online. Daz has good copies of both of those on his website, along with his own, I don't know if the word's adaptations that he's made in his own CRV manual. And there's some valuable perspective in there. So even if you just read over those, or if you wanted to keep it the simplest, probably look over Daz's. I've studied Lynn's description. I have studied multiple, Gary Lang, but I've studied 7 different modes and structures, trained 6 months with Pam Coronado. And for me, I still come back to, essentially out of the box CRV. But that, again, I can't emphasize, it's a personal thing. If what you're doing is producing the results you want,
but each of us seems to be thinking we're doing controlled remote viewing or as originally coordinate remote viewing, but there just seems so much variety. But I'm happy to move on because I know Brett's wanting to ask something.
Well, no, Daz is kind of chomping at the bit here.
Yeah, I just want to add to it that I put a link in the chat window so Julie can see it. But if you have a look at the genesis of CRV, and I've tracked all the genesis. What the version you're using at the moment is like 5 generations removed from what they taught Ingo Swann. So with every generation of teaching, it's a bit like a photocopy. It may add or lose something in the copying process, and I think that's what's probably happened with the mixing of the terms and stuff over the generations.
Okay. All right. I don't see his video, but I do see in the participants window, Brett's hand is up. Sorry, I missed that, Brett. Go ahead. Calling on Brett Stewart.
I thought he left, but let me know.
I see him in the participants window with a hand up. Okay. All right. So Daz, do you have any topics or discussion you want to bring up?
Nothing comes to mind, unless anyone's got anything that they want to discuss or something. I'm
okay.
Open.
So let's go back to open format. Whoever wants to pipe in, and if you're comfortable, just jump in on video and fire the question away, unless there's a hand up, and put it out there. Let us see your face and chat it up.
I think Kiao says he's got a topic.
Oh, that's weird. Okay.
This is in the chat window.
Oh, I don't have that open. So yeah, Daz, could you kind of monitor the chat window?
Yeah, will do.
My multitasking skills are limited to about 2.
Maybe he hasn't got a mic today, so he's typing it. Bear with me. He says, I have a stupid topic. It is learning a new process, even if it's an old one. In other words, I've been doing freeform for 9 years. That's where. And now doing CRV Ingo is super hard. You have to bear with me. I think he's typing this on the fly.
So Cal, do you want to jump on here in camera?
Hey, could I jump in for the previous conversation?
Yeah, Brett, I called on you.
I just went away from my keyboard for like 1 minute, so that must have been one.
Okay, yeah, go for it. What's going on?
Yeah, no. So I just want to add, weigh in on the conversation that Julie and you were having about structures and also stage 1, and maybe just weigh in a little bit and give a different perspective. But one of the things, Julie, you said was, and I've seen a lot of this, and I think there's merit in some cases to it personally, but it's where it's like the structure is incredibly important, right? And it's like follow the structure. And you hear this from a lot of different trainers out there. And I've heard it when I was learning from a lot of different trainers. And after doing it, and then, being a trainer myself for a period of time, when I hear that, I think the context might be helpful to kind of for others and about that idea, where it's like, I think that the follow the structure idea is really beneficial for complete beginners because it keeps them learning the process without kind of jumping outside of it from the beginning. And it's not that the structure itself is somehow magical. I think it's like, oh, it's like this magical structure. And then if you'd miss the wrong pentagram, you know what I mean? Or whatever it is that, the summonings didn't work, And so I don't think it's that you should ever really view it that way. But as a complete beginner, it actually is beneficial if they view it that way. Personally, I think, because it keeps them in line. It also helps them kind of move their perception when they're looking at the results to, how did I do? If they have a miss, it's like, well, don't worry about accuracy right early on, worry about your structure early on. And that helps them like, okay, let me detach a little bit away from the results, really focus on what the structure is. Now, the more years you have practiced with this, you find that actually there's a lot of structures that work. There are methods that have no structure that actually work. And so, but there's a reason why the structure is there, and it can be very useful, but it doesn't mean it's like I view it very much like when you learn to draw or paint. You know, you go through a class, you say, here are the people who've come before you, learn from them, learn perspective, learn different shading techniques, learn these things that have been proven to work. Does that mean they're the only way to paint or draw? Absolutely not. But we know that they work. So why would you not start there and then figure out later on, well, let me experiment with a slightly different structure, maybe test your results, you know, compare it against, so actually I'm doing better, or actually I'm doing worse. That's where I think with experience, you can begin to experiment more. But for complete beginners, that's where I think personally, the structure thing kind of comes in. But for stage one, directly related to this, which I know, Julie, you said, it's like, there are no nouns, you said, in what you learned. It's like, don't do that as far as like a major gestalt in stage one, just end with your kind of motion feeling or consistency. You know, that's the way Paul describes it. And Russell, you mentioned that. Is that I've actually heard both as well. As in some training that I took long time ago, I heard, don't do gestalt, don't just do motion, then feeling and move on, and completely omit that. And I think I've done both. I actually let whatever comes spontaneous, like right now in my own practice, like in my own sessions, if I get a major gestalt early on, I write it down and I keep going. If I don't, then I keep going anyways. I don't force it, is what I do now. I mean, take that with a grain of salt. It's just what's worked for me. But having context maybe a little bit around why one wouldn't want to get the gestalt just based on my experience maybe might be somewhat helpful. I want to weigh in and on. And I think, Julie, you mentioned this. It's that I think for some, especially beginners sometimes, unless you do a lot of very focused practice, is that if you try to get the major gestalt before you really know how to handle AOLs, is that it can evoke AOL drive because you're doing that in beginners, is that they don't really know how to let it go. It's like, oh, land. And then the whole rest of the session becomes, it must be land. And so now they're constructing that. Same with water. It's like, well, where's the water? Where's the water? You know, if they had a water gestalt when maybe it was something like mercury, you know, it's like, it's a different kind of liquid form. So I'm not trying to say CRV method is wrong or not to do it. I've used it where it's gestalts. It's worked fantastically. But I also understand the other side of it.
What I teach and the way I learn was we do a major gestalt, but what we do is we do the coordinate, ideogram, describe the ideogram, the flow of it, and then we get into textures, and then we get a major gestalt. And if we get any stage 2 stuff coming through, even color, anything, that goes on the right hand side, but it's like, well, probably we're ready for stage 2, but get your major gestalt out there and don't focus and hold on to it. But then when you're writing your summary after stage 3, if it feels right to take it through, then take it through, but don't hold on to it.
It's where I've seen just a lot of people just beginning, where when they try and I need to know the major gestalt, and then that actually throws their whole session off. Now that can actually be, I think, valuable in training too, because then they get immediate feedback. Their session was off target. Good. Try again. And you go through and you actually you do stage 1 practice to see, this is why you start with 3 different gestalts, land, water, structure. Do that just repeatedly until you start getting levels of confidence and accuracy in that approach. Yeah, but that's just one approach.
But we don't start with water, land, and structure. We
I know. I understand.
We have liquid, biological, landscape, man-made, and energetics.
Right.
And really, you don't label, and so a man-made or a structure could actually be part of a landscape, but it would seem like a structure. And really, it's not holding on to it. And the way we move them through it, we help them to not hold on to it. So, but I'm really interested in, thank you for this discussion. Yeah,
it was just I think the one final thing, Russell, and I'll hand it back. I guess my personal takeaway is there are a lot of different ways to learn how to do this, and a lot of them work. Like there are ones where I'm using no structure. I've had tremendous success on some where it's like, I didn't even do an ideogram. I was just like, okay, whatever wants to pop in, totally freeform. And it was highly accurate. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure, that works. Does that mean that's the most effective way? Maybe for some people. I don't think for myself that's the most effective way. There's clearly a lot of ways that work. And just let each methodology maybe stand on its own merits of what's been achieved with each. But
one question for you,
anyway,
Brett, is
yeah.
So you have very sustained and regimented training with Ed, is that correct?
I have, yes. Yeah.
So how many years were you obligated to that particular structure under his tutelage?
Like 4 years.
Okay.
Before I shifted over to other methodologies and started learning
correct. So
the other CRV and ERV.
This is going to bring up a point that Ingo talked about in numerous places. Specifically, Daz and I have been looking at a document recently where he made it crystal clear that remote viewing should not be taught in a short phase, and that the key factor was to ingrain and actually stimulate neuroplasticity to get an automaticity of a structure. And I'm not saying it has to be CRV, but with your, and I know how hard Ed can be, and him keeping you in structure for 4 years, that neuroplasticity, possibly, I'm not a neuroscientist, could have taken such a depth in you, and then so many rewards with what I know to be very good sessions that you've done, that could be anchored in from that platform. You've gone off just in the same sense that Daz has. So I don't want to underestimate Ingo's and Hal's.
I think you're exactly describing this idea where the analogy of like learning to draw, or learning the perspective, or learning certain painting techniques. It's like, get really good at that first, whatever that one is. If it's specifically like Paul Smith's CRV version, do that like you're doing, Russell. Get really good at that. And then once you feel super confident and you're done with that, then explore other things, because it's the same thing that people are taught in art school.
I'm not just talking about super competence. I'm talking about a physiological and neurological response. And Daz can back me up on this. Ingo drove that very deeply home in this particular document, that sustained repetition with a structure is essential. And he, even in the discussion of maybe later doing some sort of a remote viewing school, he didn't even see it as viable because of the time and dedication it would take for people to reach that stage. And it's less than 4 years, okay? But you had 4 years of somebody driving you to maintain the structure, and in that structure, I was trained by Ed Dames, obviously nowhere near where you were, but I know how shall I say, firm he is about.
He was the most like.
So for a new person,
you're doing something wrong.
For a new person, I have yet, this is one thing I will kind of stand by. I have yet to see a person that's hopping around from structure to structure to structure, consistently produce the kind of data that someone like Gail or Sandra or Paul or Daz needs to solve problems. And
I think I would completely agree. And that's probably because they haven't, exactly what you're saying, they haven't spent enough time on one. And it's like really get really proficient on one. And then, and this is exactly what I did, is I felt really proficient in TRV, and like, I still use TRV, but then I was like, you know what, I'm going to go and learn Paul Smith's method. And so I went and did that. And I completely spent all my time focused only on doing the Paul Smith CRV method. And then I was like, okay, now I want to go do Morehouse's stuff. So I went and did Morehouse's stuff and just purely focused on that. And from that point, now I have like a lot I can kind of draw from, but I never would recommend. I think you're absolutely right, Russell, that, and I mean, if Ingo said this, folks stay with one. And I actually have firsthand, I have people I've worked with in the past that have done the exact opposite, where they've jumped back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And they wondered why their sessions weren't getting better, why it was kind of like they just had a mess in their work. And so, and they even thought that, they speculated that was the reason why. And that was the suggestion I had for them. Stick with something.
And let's say in your case, and now I'm going to use just GED level analogies for neurology. Okay. So let's say you, for those 4 years of, let's just say enforced TRV, let's say that this neuro pathway, tendril, whatever you want to call it, that you built there, when you go look at Paul's method, it might run on the same highway, but be just a little off-road. In other words, you
Could
didn't,
be.
in other words, it could easily transit and adapt. And I know when you monitor me, I asked you to do it strictly by Paul's modality, and I was very impressed that you can flip a switch and do out of the box TRV or out of the box CRV. So I just think that you got to lay some foundation as a belief, except for the phenoms. And I see them, I know them, I envy them. Okay, I've watched them just go poof, and you're like, how did you do that? So they're out there. I just don't think it's the majority. Now, when it comes to structure, I have seen Lynn and Lori's students do exceedingly amazing work beyond my own. I look at Dick Algeier. I look at Das, who has his own slight adaptation. I've looked at TRV people, you being one, that produce sessions I haven't produced the likes of. You can go around to any of these camps, but you and every person that I can point at in any of those groups that's exceedingly good did that one structure. Didn't matter whose it was, but they did that one for a sustained period of time and generally under some sort of instruction. On the flip
That's probably
side,
the big takeaway. That's definitely the huge takeaway for people that are beginning RV, I think.
yeah.
Like I would
But
100%
on the
agree
flip
with you.
side, we have to acknowledge to this very day, Tom McNear uses precisely, exactly, and only what Ingo taught him. And I've looked at some of his old sessions lately. His last 7 sessions, he named the target. And some of them, he had never even been to the target or heard the name before. So he did a session 2 years before Ingo's passing on video, or at least, I'm sorry, it may not have been video, but it was snapshots of him sitting there with Ingo 2 years before Ingo's passing, straight. And I've talked to Tom at length about this, straight CRV out of the box. When Paul did his demo sessions for our class, which were the 4 students secretly creating a target, then giving it to Paul's assistant in basic, Angela, and then intermediate and advanced, Bill Ray. So it was double blind. The students knew what it was, but Paul's monitor, i.e. his assistant, didn't. And I watched Paul nail 2 sessions with straight CRV after this many years. So he didn't adapt it. Tom hasn't adapted it. And again, that may just be preference, could be a number of things, but it's not like everybody adapts it either. And that's where I come back to this thing where, look, our perceptual systems vary. They have unique aspects. We have memories. Your memories are nowhere near mine. We might have 2 or 3 shared ones. Everybody's vocabulary, all these other things are unique. But I am an advocate, and if it's this instructor, that instructor, Hawaii Remote Viewing Guild, TRV, SRV, whatever, pick one and stay with it long enough to get that automaticity built in, and then vary. Myself, I don't know that I'm going to vary because I'm not there yet. Maybe I will do some adaptation or whatever. But when I look and you fully understand CRV, there isn't anything it doesn't accommodate. There's a space on your paper for every possible thing, and it's minimalistic. It doesn't over elaborate on stage 4 or any of these things. And when you learn to play with the miracle of stage 5 and you take the time, even if it's a sustained session or a split session, do some clay modeling, try it, or maybe it's not clay for you, maybe it's, wooden sticks or what have you. But if people don't give some version of that a chance within themselves, they're just not going to know. And at the same time, like everybody here, there could be people here under 10 different instructors with 10 different methods. And I would support that person, tell them, follow your instructor. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Paul. Don't listen to, follow your instructor. You selected them. You paid for the services. They have some level of experience to even be, doing. So stick with that. And the hopping around thing, I think probably at some level that isn't going to serve one well. Anyways, tirade over. Ida, I see your hand up.
Yes, I have one question which people can give me information in the chat. I'm still looking at doing something online because of circumstances for the first, stages 1 through 3. And I've been seeking around, and I haven't found anything that fits. So if any of you have suggestions, please send them to me in the chat. Okay, the second thing, experiential, because I did a target, and it was a very different experience than my everyday life. Everyday life, I don't have any problems with flying, boats, water. I have no problems with any kind of motion sickness, I guess is the best thing to call it. This particular target, as soon as I got the number, and yes, Daz, I am going to call it a squiggle, I immediately got vertigo. I don't have vertigo in real life. It doesn't exist for me in real life. I mean, there's nothing I liked better than going up to the Grand Canyon and standing right on that edge and looking. I walked on the glass walkway that tribe built. I don't have vertigo, but in the session, I got vertigo to the point where I had to step back and just say, okay, this target is not for me, but I'm going to put my emotion, I'll do what I can with it. And has anybody else had that experience?
May I ask a clarification question, and then everybody else can pop in? Are
Sure.
you at liberty to say what the target was? Or if not, can I ask you a couple questions that won't reveal the nature of the target?
Oh, no. I mean, it was a practice target. It was Machu Picchu. In fact, as soon as I got the target number, I immediately flashed on that particular location.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, there goes AOL again. And then all of a sudden it was like I was up there and I got a serious case of vertigo. I mean, I have had patients who've had it, and so I recognized all the symptoms, and I also recognized the physical symptoms, and I thought, I don't think I'm ever going to go paragliding again.
Now that begs, several questions as to what, given in your, daily three-dimensional life, if you will, you're not prone to fear of heights or vertigo, what there would cause it. One theory, and this may not be so given the nature of your target, is that you could pick up on other people's feelings there. In other words, their EI can sometimes become our AI. In my own case, I almost for the entirety of basic had motion sickness several times in sessions, and they didn't involve height. In fact, the very first movement exercise Paul gave me, I didn't even understand, because he did it in military on a heading of 260 degrees, blah, 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 get 250 feet above the target. And my pen was on the paper, and I just quickly whipped a line out and put an X at the end of it. And then that was before he actually finished the full movement exercise. What was that? And I thought that I might go like this, because I felt like I'd been snapped up on a bungee.
Yes.
And it was, and so several times, if I look back through my original training stuff, seasickness, motion sickness, I would take a personal inclemency break until it went down. Now that has resolved. That happens less and less and less. So I can't explain why. Maybe it was just unique to me, but that So then when we were done, we looked over, and Paul was interested because that ended up being almost precisely 260 degrees, which I don't understand that terminology. It's just like latitude, longitude. You could rattle them off all day, and I have no idea where any of it is. So what part of me knew? And then the increase of elevation was estimatable because of the height of the target. And so without any conscious understanding, I went up 200 and some feet and around to that precise heading that he understood and I didn't. But that I literally got so queasy that I think I remember like said, putting my hands on the table. Anybody else have any experiences with the type of thing that I just elaborated?
I wanted to throw in that I was glad Ida brought that up, because I've tasked multiple targets where people have told me that they either got queasy. Most recently, I did a target involving dolphins and communication and training with dolphins. And some of the remote viewers did feel nauseous that are used to getting kind of seasick. And that's not the only target. There were several where people reported feelings that they actually would have gotten probably had they been at the site. So Ida, you're not alone in that particular situation.
Yeah, thank you, Fabian.
Oh yeah.
Anybody else have a story, response, anecdote for Ida?
I have a second-hand anecdote, which is, I believe it was John Vivanco was tasked the Dresden bombings as a training target. Everybody else doing it was beginner students, and he did it for some reason. The story goes that he came out of the experience with actual physical burn marks up his arms, and he had quite the freak out. And it took some, like it physically, his body manifested being burned, which, I'd like to take his word for it, but it's never happened to me.
Yeah, no, I've heard that, and we could, we could pick that up as a side topic as we move on. I've heard of stories. I believe there is a very solid mechanism for it. And is it possible someone could have such an identification with an aspect of a site that their body could dramatize it? I believe so. I've never seen it or experienced it. But if you want to bring that back up as a separate topic in a while, David, jump in with it, okay? I did that.
I don't know anything about it. It's not a pet thing of mine.
Oh, okay. Do as you wish.
I mean, I would say that did remind me to say, we can heal ourselves, right? So why can't we make ourselves sick or burnt?
Oh, sure.
Why not?
Yeah. Okay, Ida, are you getting responses in the chat on your first question?
I got a single track mind. No.
Okay.
I mean, maybe nobody's doing online because, magical COVID doesn't exist or whatever, but I'm okay.
Okay. Well, one thing, and again, it's always a bias on my part. And one point, I'll just quit declaring it because everybody's going to understand it. Paul does have a DVD set out there that instructs one up to stage 3. It's put out through the same publisher as Ed Daines's materials. At one point recently, they had it down to $99. I trained 3 people with that DVD, my girlfriend, our housemate, and my own brother, and all 3 of them have really done very well. Now I gave them a little extra assistance, but you have access to that same level of, somebody helping you a little bit here and there. So that is a good one for stage 3. Daz, are you aware of any resources for stage 3 online instruction?
Stage 3 online instruction.
Up to stage 3.
Up to stage 3. Only the stuff Courtney's stuff, of course, is on my website. All his stuff's free, and the Prudence Calabrese TDS stuff. All the videos for that's on my Remote View YouTube channel as well. But that's the only stuff.
And it looks like in the chat, Prush Rodby said that Lori Williams has a free masterclass, and it's stages 1 through 3.
Right, and
I did that free masterclass, and it's
did?
Yeah, it's very basic.
Gotcha.
Also, Pam Coronado has a very affordable CRV class. I'm not sure if it runs consistently, but I didn't take it because I was training with Paul, but I did take her psychic detective. But she does have a actual CRV course. Now she has trained with both Paul and Lynn and kind of has her own adaptive modality. But I can say the dynamics of the online, the other people, the social aspect, the getting live feedback on your session when you upload it. I found that experience with her to be very, very valuable.
I also have
Right.
about an hour and a half of free training, stage 1 through stage 4, on my YouTube channel as well.
Oh, that's right. You're right there, and I forgot. So yeah, Brett also has, and I've heard some people say that it was very methodical and useful to them. So it's more concise, condensed. Brett, is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, that's everything that I try and put together, from the book I put together to these videos.
Well,
I try and kind of
throw a link
narrow it down.
Throw a link to that free video or whatever.
Yeah, I can get.
In
Let
the
me get
chat.
the playlist. Let me get the playlist. It's about an hour and a half of videos. It's 5 videos total, but it goes
Okay.
through stage 1 to
Yeah,
stage
put it
4.
up in the chat for everybody, and specifically Ida can then take
Yeah,
a look
sure.
at it.
And I appreciate that, because what I trained in was many years ago, and I've been using it, but I'm interested in what's the current availability. And as far as what I'm going to do when I can travel again, yeah, I've reconsidered what I said. I'll probably go paragliding again. It's just that I was so shocked by my reaction in that target, because like I said, I've been on airplanes that were close to crashing and everybody else was throwing up, and my son and I are sitting there and he goes, "Mom, would you please make this stop?" And I go, "Okay." And then the guy next to me, after it stops, gets up and moves away because he doesn't want to sit next to someone who speaks magic words.
Well,
it was a fun experience.
Just no paragliding off of Machu Picchu, okay?
Oh, come on. They have some magnificent birds that fly around there.
All right, I was just trying to give a little helping hint there. All right, Brett's put up a link, everybody. Demi, if you want to post links to Lori Williams, do it. Now's the time for everybody. If they have a favorite stage 1 through stage 3 instructor, put a link up there, let everybody see it, let people shop around, compare, find out what works for them, who they have an affinity for as an instructor. So feel free, fill that chat up with references on the topic. Okay. Yeah. Next person that's been very patiently waiting is David. And I'm going to take the liberty of doing a slight promo for David. David gets a start Paul's training 3 days from now on Monday. And he was the first recipient of a grant. Some of Paul's students had put some funds out there, and David had shown himself over a period of time to work and be disciplined, and he was selected by the grant committee. So I'm really excited for him. He gets to fly into Cedar City, enjoy a week of, I'm actually a little envious. You're going to have a great time, Cedar City, the field trips and everything. So with that, I will introduce David Powell.
Thanks, Russell. I just wanted to say, we're talking about, it took me a long time I did a lot of research on different modalities, and ended up really liking CRV, more particularly kind of Paul's take on it. But, it took me a long time to get there to that conclusion. And there's several authors here, and I would love to, I don't know several, but I know Brett's wrote books, Daz, I know you've been involved in some editing, stuff like that, Russell. But I would love to see a book that specifies the outline of complete training programs, instructors involved, their background, their experience and level of training, the financial aspects of it, the pros and the cons of all the modalities in each, for a person to decide which path to take and their goals within remote viewing. I'm sure there's programs out there if you just want to be like a weekend warrior and just do some stage 3 type stuff. You could, they can do something online or from whoever, but what the classroom sizes might be, what the courses entails. I think that would be an interesting book to help people who might be getting into this with various goals. It might help them get on their path.
Hey Daz, would you be
Yep.
up for posting? Is it issue 16 that had or what issue is it?
Bear with me a sec. Yes, 16. I'll post the link up there.
Okay. Issue 16 of Daz's publication has an interview with almost all of the major remote viewing instructors, and they address a good portion of the data. It's a brilliant issue, and they're substantial interviews. They're not just, a paragraph. So when I was looking through that, you could really hear their philosophy, their background, their experience. So not that it's a book, but it's a great resource to kind of get into the minds of how many people did you interview?
It's Angela Smith, Brett, Colleen Morenich, Courtney Brown, me, Deborah Lynn Katz, Dick Augar, Lauren Cott, Lynn Buchanan, Laurie Williams, Morgan Farrell, Patty Gallagher, Paul O'Connor, Paul H. Smith, Rick Hilliard, Stephen Schwartz, and Todd Ronan. So quite a lot.
Okay. And it really is good. And you'll enjoy it. It's a super resource to get acquainted with these people before you make contact or commitment. And I see a lot of people putting good posts in the chat for resources. So that's awesome. Now, Ida, do you still have your hand up or do you want to take it down? Okay. If you're done with your question, take your hand down. If not, then all right. So we have 2 people in queue, and the first up is Fabian.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
All right. This is something that I've become curious about kind of recently. It's going to step away from different people's modalities and strategies and all that stuff. But I'm curious who has developed an end game with this. After you have been studying remote viewing for a number of years, you're happy with where you are, and what is coming next for you? So I found that this is kind of a loaded question for a lot of people, but everybody has different answers. So I was kind of curious, Russell, if you have a particular end game, and Daz, anybody else who wants to chime in, what has this inspired in your life that maybe wasn't there before remote viewing was introduced?
Okay. Are you ready for some crazy talk?
Oh, hell yeah.
All right, good. So what remote viewing did for me, and to this day, it's still emotional to talk about it. When I was associated with a person who was so good at it naturally, they had taken Ed Dames's video while I was away, actually taking Ed's training in person. They couldn't afford to go, so I bought them the Ed's DVD set. When I came back and saw their work, I was like, oh, no. You're not supposed to sketch the picture they give you. You're supposed to, and then I tested and tested. There was a moment of realization where I openly wept because it was the first time after, I guess at that time, 30 some years of diets and yoga and meditation and overindulgence and hedonism and extreme sports and every damn thing under the sun to get some relief from this stupid place and try to see something that I could put my heart into. The certainty that I got from watching this, and she's my current housemate, watching her sessions, which sometimes were a drawing of the entirety of the feedback page, not the feedback page, but a representation. So it was the first time, sure, I have a wispy thought and I have a vision or I get a little experience, but then you would always go back, oh, this was trainable, repeatable, and verifiable. So between the time that I first failed at remote viewing, I quit because I wasn't happy with my own product, but I stayed with the study. During that period, I had a realization, and what I want to do is nothing less than see every human being liberated from our nonsense, our illusions, our delusions, our madness, and for lack of a better term, return to source. Okay, it's crazy. It's a huge thing. There's a meaning to it for me. So that is actually my end game. And that is at one level what I am absolutely and fully dedicated to in my life. When I went back to take remote viewing, it was to enhance my new end game. So in a way, remote viewing stimulated what is my end game. And now, so think of this. Perception is the key. So for instance, if God showed up before us and our perception was screwed up, we're not even going to see God. If our perception's screwed up, we're not even going to see each other. So in terms of clarification of perception, I've chosen remote viewing to keep me busy, to evolve my end game. I believe deep in my heart that at the end of all of this, each of us will be fully reconciled, will at some point realize our craziness, will get the stupidity out of ourselves, and in the end, things will be okay. I think between here and there, things could also be pretty rough, and whether you want to call it Maya, illusion or not, the pain is still real. So my use of remote viewing is, to me, it's the closest thing to my end game. And by clearing our perception, think of it, anything we can see more clearly gives us the ability to be more of a solution to the problem. So there's my wacky answer. Does anybody
That's a
else
great answer.
have an end game on remote viewing to add to Fabian's question?
I don't have an end game because I don't know where the game ends, like I don't want to say that's the answer. I'm just working towards that because really I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I just want to echo some stuff that Russell said there because I came to remote viewing like 2.5 years ago from a like materialist reductionist standpoint where like, oh, I was a scientist, but with a capital S, so an idiot. What did it for me with RV was feedback, that you can hone your perception and awareness by knowing when it's correct or not. People sit there and they're like, I'm channeling the whatever and I'm gonna do all this weird stuff. There's no feedback. They have no idea whether they're really getting better or whether they're just deceiving themselves. And remote viewing, you can say that's correct, that's not correct. I did it, I didn't do it. I've got into a bunch of other weird stuff, and my ability to move my awareness around has really grown as a result of doing RV. And it's a good yardstick.
Yeah.
So, I can use RV because it has the feedback. I know when I'm wrong, I know when I'm right. So I can use it to steer me. Not that I know where I'm going, like to say, what's the end game? Like, how can I possibly know what the end game is? It's an impossible question. But I feel like I'm going in the right direction. For me, there's the feedback element of RV that makes it a useful yardstick for how well I'm doing at developing myself and getting my own junk out of the way so I can see clearly. But I mean, Fabian, what's your end game?
Oh,
I was kind of
Tables have
scared
been-
somebody was going to turn that back around on me.
tables have been
Yeah.
turned.
I want a specimen answer.
Wow. I have several end games. I came into remote viewing specifically from a background of meditation and astral projection and wanting to think, well, were my experiences real? And if remote, see, of all the things I've studied in the past, I'll stick on astral projection for a moment. That's one of those things that it can be so out there and fruity that you can't prove much. However, if anything of that could possibly be real, if you wanted to really hone in on what makes up a mind and what how does the mind connect to the universe, then remote viewing is a very good study of that. It's the one scientific field that seems to say, it puts right out there, statistically speaking, it puts right out there, you can realistically see something that is outside of your perception, a far distance away. So no matter what's happening, you are proving something that common science is really struggling with right now. And I've listened to a number of scientists, all the respected guys who have all their own TV shows and everything. And anytime one of them is asked about the nature of consciousness, they all back off and they say, oh, well, we don't, science doesn't do consciousness. And so they leave it alone. And the thing is, anytime consciousness is studied in a scientific way, major breakthroughs are made. And so I had this conversation a while back with somebody who's a strict atheist, and he got me really thinking. He said, when I was talking with him about consciousness specifically, he said, oh, consciousness doesn't matter. It's just a byproduct of, biologically what we are. And I thought, wow, so there's a world of people who have no value for perception and what they actually might be. So I'm not going to say that an atheist is wrong. I'm just going to say, interesting. If you say consciousness means nothing, then you've closed the door to every possible scientific field. Because the whole purpose of science really is to explore and discover new ways of interacting with the world you live in and understanding the universe. And so if you remove yourself from that, then suddenly you're left with nothing, and there's no reason for science. So my first thought was, okay, well, what kind of science does have some kind of focus on consciousness outside of remote viewing? This is before I knew about remote viewing. And I thought, the pharmaceutical industry, they care about consciousness, regardless of what's going on in your body. If you're experiencing pain or you've say physical pain or a pain emotional that you experienced as a child or growing up or something recent, any of that stuff, pharmacists can create chemicals to fix it. And that in and of itself is a study of consciousness. What can a scientist do to affect consciousness? So when I came into remote viewing, I came in from a background of thinking, okay, is there something technological that can be done with an understanding of how remote viewing works? How is it that remote viewing will be shared to those who are not we live right now in a time of people who just keep their faces in their cell phones. This community is a very small community of people who are developing their minds. And a lot of the world is not doing that. A lot of the world is waiting on technology to do it for them. So I'm curious about what technological breakthroughs are going to piggyback on what we're doing naturally. So that's a piece of my end game. And that was long-winded. So I'll open it back up to you guys, but I'm asking because I'm curious about people's end games. I love that you and Russell had completely almost opposite answers. One, Russell, you were talking from a perspective of you, as I also believe in a source, and that we are, in my mind, we are all one, essentially. We're all working together. We have this illusion that we're separate individual beings. But I think my personal opinion is that remote viewing works because we're not separate consciousness. We have separate bodies, but our consciousness is all connected. And that's not limited to our body, and it's universal. So that there goes my opinions. But I also like the flip side of that answer. I don't know where it's going, because the truth is, I guess the way I asked the question, that I don't believe there is an end game. If there was an end game, then why even start to begin with? So we're all working toward growth. It's kind of maybe a way of saying what my answer is. There's growth. I believe that remote viewing is a part of the stepping stones that will help us grow as beings. As for the end game, I honestly don't know. That's why I want to know yours, so I can get a sense of, do I need to add new elements to the way I see the world?
Well, and one thing, even though you pointed out the difference, the real solid common ground between David and I was, it's the feedback. It was certain. And once I knew that I knew things I'd hoped and dreamed for, that, like you said, disappeared into a nebulous, was that out of body? Was that astral? Was that, this, that, or the other? But man, when I controlled the targets for this person, I had them locked in a safe 8 miles away. Not that that mattered, but I made sure not to even bring the target envelope to the house. And then after they would do a session, I would drive and get it. And I mean, it was undeniable. There was no question. So, when David talked about coming from science to something undeniable that he could actually see in front of him, that was a key part. One thing I want to do, so I'm going to acknowledge, first of all, Kiao is in line and Rich is in line, and they've been very patient. But in regards to the end game, I'd actually like to elicit someone out of the crowd. I may pronounce your name incorrect. Neum. Is that it? Neum V?
Nah, Naeem.
Naeem. Okay, thank you. So I heard you speak, maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, about some uses for remote viewing, about how, I think it was blockchain and some other things could bring human relief. And I found some of it very interesting. Do you, regarding remote viewing, do you have your own end game or ideal application for it in mind?
I don't know if I have an ideal application, because I still think we're still kind of just at the doors of what this is. But I think if we can, in the short term, apply it in ways that can help people on a more earth level, because people aren't really, we get too woo woo, people kind of lose interest. So with the cryptocurrencies and financial markets, I think that is a good way in the beginning to get people to look at it, because for 90% of the population, money is what makes the world go around. So if there isn't some kind of benefit for them, they might not look. But
well, one thing I remember that I'd never thought of, because I don't know anything about crypto, ARV, or blockchain. But you talked about one thing, that there was some aspect of it that would give people the ability to create some money for themselves that are in situations, say geographically, where that isn't viable. So you were talking about that people could get a hold of something and produce something for themselves, and it was all kind of a combination of remote viewing, ARV, crypto, and that's why I was asking. So you have more of a very pragmatic humanitarian interest in application?
Yeah. I think it's going to be a powerful tool for self-reliance, and kind of not making us depend on so many outside, information. Like right now, media kind of controls pretty much everyone. So if we could all, at least a small group of us, could start to pull in our own information streams, we can kind of create our own narratives and create our own futures, more consciously, instead of kind of just going with the signals that come from who knows, and whatever companies and media groups and things like that. So it's like kind of like in Ingo Swann's Secrets of Power, kind of like the unfolding of human abilities to the point where we can actually have a new perception of what we are and what reality is. Okay. That's what I think it could lead to that eventually.
If I may, that we're talking about personal development here and our awareness and source and end games and all the rest of it. But if you're really struggling to make ends meet, you don't have the foundation, you don't have the security in which you can do that. you know, if it's putting food on the table. So that's a really important thing, to empower people to have the space and the security to go inwards, you know, because when outwards is just attacking you all the time by lack or whatever, you can't do this stuff. You know, we're a very privileged bunch of people that we can and we have. And if we were starving, we would have other priorities than this. So, you know, helping people make a buttload of money will wake them up to the reality of this stuff, sure, but it will put them in a position where they can really invest their time in it. All right, I'll shut up.
Yeah, well, no, don't. This is open chat, man. So go for it.
No, but I don't want to bang on.
Yeah. So no, I didn't jump in the conversation then because it was all stuff I didn't know a lot about. But I remember being struck by you saying that people could give some autonomy and make some money independent of their geographical or even social situation. And autonomy, like even David just implied, it's going to be important. If you're hungry, you're going to be doing one thing. If you get some autonomy and your tummy's full, you might then take a platform and expand into more. So anyways, it was interesting. I kind of reserved that for the next time I could pick your brain about it. So thank you, and hopefully you didn't mind getting called out there. Okay, so Kiao is next in line, and jump on in, man. Your sound is not working. I think I read your lips there. All right, I'm going to go to Rich, and then we'll come back to you when you get your life together there. Okay.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go.
Good. It was only one button.
Okay.
So just really quickly to answer to the question that we were just on, is what I think from my own personal experience is that if you are practicing CRV, because over 9 years, I've taken a year off at a time, or I had to work for 7 months and I just had no practice time. But it's my theory that it activates things in yourself that you just naturally use and you're not even aware of them. But because you're practicing, you're using them better and more. So I've done all kinds of backflips and jumps through hoops that my friends in Mexico and Canadians are thinking, how the fuck did that guy do that? And why? It's because at that moment in my life, I was practicing CRV. So I think there is a very practical aspect to it that if you can convince a person to do 15 to 30 minutes a day, their life will improve, but it improves over a period of months and years. Okay, so I'm done with that. Here's my actual question that was from way back before I could get my act together on the microphone here. And I'm going to get give you the backup so that we get really informed answers, because I know you guys know this. I know you have the answers. So my problem is I started with free form, and basically in a real general sense, sit in front of a piece of paper, 15 minutes, do an ideogram. If it's AOL, in other words, if it's a noun, label it as AOL, and that's about it. We're free to do whatever the hell we want other than that. So I've been doing practice targets, and I can pull out a name within 10 minutes, but it's not in a stage. And I've drawn pretty decent drawings of things. But again, my consistency rate is all over the road. It's no good. And when I see the CRV people, I consider most of you, for example, Niam, Russ, Daz, all of you guys that I've seen your sessions, Joffrey, that to me is what I call CRV, because I can see their stages developing. So I decided, let's learn this. It's not that hard. There's lots of material. And is what I'm doing as I'm trying to practice this stuff now, I really think I need a Buddhist monk sitting right next to me with a bamboo cane. And whenever I start to move off, he whacks me, because I'm so used to going way the hell all over the place. Russell, you mentioned it very clearly at the very beginning of this, the breaks and the state of mind where you're very precisely and finely watching how the information is going. And that is what's determining your direction and pace. So I'll just keep going with the backup. So for me, it's about staying on focus. What else? And to me, yeah, well, okay, I already got that. Sorry. So I'm kind of battling two on another issues. What I'm doing these days is I'll do one session trying to learn Ingo 6 stage from what I've gathered. Then I do another session free form. And that's my way of being able to not go absolutely crazy, but which I already am, but I'm trying to get some clues from you guys on the self-discipline and the state of consciousness practice management that includes breaks or other things that I'm kind of barely aware of, and which I'm darn sure if I do that, my consistency, my hit level will go up, because I've seen that in freeform, when I do that, when I stay on the target, I can, or if I'm in that state of consciousness that I know it's the right one, I can do the same thing that the English 6 stage people are. But you guys have a setup that works really, really well. And that will keep me, I believe, will keep me on focus. So if you guys have clues how to get the crazies onto kind of like a rhythm or a pace that works well in the English 6 stage.
I want to throw something out really quick here before the experts chime in, but accept that you're gonna make mistakes and be wrong and not hit targets a lot. And just be okay with that. It's a new thing. Don't expect to learn it and have it work.
Dave, I've been keeping statistics for 9 years. So I have a pretty, like, in other words, I know my 40th session, I'm going to knock it way the hell out of the ballpark. But I can see aspects in the other 39 sessions where it's like, oh, damn, if I had stayed there and if I hadn't started thinking about Eddie Van Halen or Ladies and Pizza, that's what I'm trying to get to.
One thing I'll plug in here, and remember, Ingo Swann at the ASPR in particular, and over the course of a lifetime, but at the ASPR in particular, was producing incredible results with no structure. He was a natural psychic. He was asked to introspect, and one of the most interesting comments I've read from Ed May is that Ingo has exceptional internal awareness. So when he was creating CRV, he was reverse engineering a combination of lots of things: Theosophy, Scientology, later Silva Mind Control, and Avatar. He had a big composite. And the last two came after CRV. But he was doing what you're saying, freeform, and achieved results that were validated enough by science that he ended up at SRI. So what he was trying to do was look in and, okay, how did I do this? Then he brought in all these other people. How did they do this? So the structure is a reverse engineering of a natural process. The structure was not imposed upon anything. Regarding the bamboo stick, Paul has one. Now, not that Joffrey was ever exposed to it because he didn't make mistakes, but I got the bamboo stick, and it's startling. And when you care so much about somebody and their opinion of you, a mentor, and they say in a very kind way, you just screwed the pooch, or that was stupid, it hurts a little more than somebody you don't care what they think. And so those introspections that kind of correction launches you into is very important. It sounds like you're doing those introspections naturally. I'm here, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking about pizza, and now I'm here. So a lot of this has to be done in the rearview mirror. If you don't look at a session and say, I got this, and when I got it, it was this quality of voice. And then you look at a session where you missed it. When I got this, it was this quality of voice, and be able to compare the two. In terms of the discipline, I don't know how to put that except for just do it. Literally, if I were to shift my camera to the stacks of paper that generated essentially pure crap, and until the point I finally, and look, giving up my urge to be right, which is, kind of been a lifelong theme, it was not easy. And the day I found myself sitting here screaming out loud, I wish my left brain would die, just that frustrated. Finally, and I can't remember who just said it, maybe it was David. When I finally said, I literally, and normally I don't do this in public, but I will, I don't give a shit if I'm right. I literally don't care. And that's the first time I got the concept of content be damn structure. Paul then starts saying, hey, your structure looks great. Your structure looks great. And your structure is improving, or this, that, the other. And then, and no kidding, content followed. It did. And now I've had actual real world operational sessions where I contributed something, not the star of the show, but maybe I had an angle of a thing or something the other viewers didn't have. So in that slice of 6 people, now I'm contributing, which is something I couldn't imagine. So just all I can say is just persist on the practice aspect. There's days where, I felt so muddled up in my head over this, that, the other. I didn't feel like it, and I just did it. And, I listened to Lynn's theory on no cool down, just mow the lawn, wash the dishes, do a remote viewing session, go wax the car, just in a daily, series of events. So the only advice I could give you, and I already quit once, and I decided I'm not going to quit again. And so the failure rate and the inner consternation and the discouragement and everything, it was substantial. And I just decided I'm going through whatever this is, and I'm going to get to the light at the other end of this tunnel. So in my case, it was a combination of having quit once, deciding to never do it again, and to get back on this horse. So that was my advice, just raw determination.
In the discussion that opened up this call, there was the advice as well to focus on one methodology only and ace it, and not to chop and change. And I think it was Brett said that it had students who were trying to do more than one thing at once. Is that right? Yeah. So maybe just give up doing the natural sessions to stay sane, and just do CRV or do whatever, and just do that. I mean, that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm learning TRV at the moment. Don't burn me at the stake, please. And I've just given up CRV and NRV and ERV and everything else. Yeah, all right, thanks, Daz. So that only works on vampires. Anyway, so I've just given up everything else, and I'm just focusing on that until I smash that. And then, yeah, but I mean, I've learned TDS and I've learned CRV. I've just focused on one thing, and I miss and I miss and I fail and I fail and I get better, rather than being like, oh, I'll just sneak off and just do a quick session in a methodology that I'm comfortable with, and I'm nervous about doing a different methodology when I haven't really cemented what I'm learning. I think you need consistency for training. So maybe that's worth trying. Just give up having hits with the methodology you're familiar with until you can get hits with the methodology that you're learning.
Yeah, no, I agree. In that, and whether it's, again, Brett's an example. He did disciplined, regimented, enforced TRV under a significant amount of pressure, and look at him now. Okay, other people did it with this method. Other people did it with that method. Some people did it with CRV. So I agree with that. Hey, Daz, I'm going to pop out for a minute. I need to go upstairs. Whenever I'm allowed upstairs, they stomp on the floor. So I'm going to go up and do whatever it is that needs to be done. So we take over for a few minutes.
Yeah, no problem.
And please, everybody, jump in with their tips and advice for Kiao in terms of, training, routine, schedule, whatever. So I'll be back in a few minutes.
Could I chime in there?
Kiao, I'd love to. I want to piggyback on what Russell was just saying. It made me laugh a little bit because it his advice goes outside of remote viewing as well. That's the key to success across so many different disciplines and everywhere in the world, really, is allowing yourself to fail and learn from your failures. I have gotten so used to failing and being wrong in my life that, for a long time, I didn't have the pressure of having to be right. I'm talking about my first marriage. I was divorced, and I was always wrong in that marriage. So, but now I'm married again, and I'm a much happier person. And so sometimes being right is not always the same thing as being happy. And and being right, successful, and all that stuff. Sometimes failure is kind of like a predecessor to really getting to where you want to be. So it's okay to make a lot of mistakes along the path. I basically failed until I was forced to win, in a way. If you fail at failing, you're a winner. That's my advice to you.
Could I go on here? I think one really, you know, interesting way to look at the remote viewing phenomenon is like through art. So, you know, there's the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, and it's like most people look at art and you see an artist painting something or drawing something and it just looks like they're like what we would call a natural. They're just drawing it and they're just good at it. But really every artist is actually going through a methodology. There are certain things they look for. They are checking for lights and shadows and negative spaces and positive forms, and you know how things are to the horizontal and vertical axis and stuff like that. But it looks like they're just drawing, and you know, you get the amazing result. So it's kind of the similar thing with remote viewing. It's like going through those little steps in the structure make it give you the complete picture. So as you're working and you know you get things wrong, you get things right, don't look at it so much as it's just a miss. It's more like, you know, you got some things right. You know what I mean? Like an artist might get the lighting right, but they might get some other part wrong. So it's like, as you build your familiarity with the structure, it becomes what we would call a natural, because naturals are doing those things. Just like how Russell was kind of saying, Ingo had to introspect to build the structure. So yeah, I really recommend that book though, because that one flips the switches in your mind, and you know, to look at it in small pieces, not just like I missed, or you know, I hit or I miss, you know what I mean? So that's my take on that one.
Can you repeat the book title in the end?
That's Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Mary. It's been talked about a lot, yeah, but it's incredible.
Yeah, my dad was an art teacher and he told me about it. And I went through it on the 1 hour. She has a video based on that. So of course I've done that video course, but I think, yeah, now it's time to get the book. So thank you. That's really, really good advice.
There's an anecdote that I heard, and I have no idea if it's true, but I think the story was about Pablo Picasso, and he was sitting by some art gallery at an event, drawing little sketches for people, and people were paying $500. Let's say it's $500 for each of these little sketches. And a woman came up and was ready to buy her sketch. She's like, I'm supposed to pay $500 for that? It only took you 30 seconds. And his answer was, no, my dear, that took me 50 years. Because I think effortless to him, it took no time at that point. It took him a whole lifetime of experience and refinement. And that's how I end a community chat.
Anyone
We didn't
else
hear
have
half of
anything?
that, man, but we'll have to remote view it.
Anyone have anything else to say on this topic, or should we go to the next question? I think Rich is next. Do you want to go for it, Rich?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Cool. I guess I have a two-part thing. Quick question. I think maybe Brett, you'd have the best experience, Brett Stewart. It sounded like I had to cut away for work, but it sounded like you had training in the TDS style of remote viewing. Is that right? Like transdimensional systems?
TDS from which trainer?
I had mine through John Vivanco. I think
Got
you
it.
said
No.
Ed Dames was yours.
So I never did TDS. So that's
Okay.
Calabrese, Vivanco.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
TR. I did when I first got into this around 2010, early 2011. I did TRV, which was through the Learn
Gotcha.
RV stuff. I went and took a lot of one-on-one training with Ed. I worked at a lot of the workshops, helping teach others, and then also doing like private training after that for several years. And
Gotcha,
then
okay.
after I did that, I went over and started learning the other methodologies after I kind of, that was done. And I was like, well, I want to learn the Paul Smith stuff. So I went and did that.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went over and I wanted to learn extended remote viewing with Morehouse. And so I learned, which was kind of a combination between the Gateway program through Robert Moreau Institute. And it's very, Morehouse's stuff comes from that, but he has his own kind of spin on it, essentially. So I kind of did both the Gateway and the ERV with Morehouse after that as well. So never TDS though. I know it came, but yeah, so no, not that specific system, unfortunately.
I guess my ultimate question was, thank you for that. I guess my ultimate question was, if you had a Venn diagram of TDS and controlled remote viewing, what would the overlap be? I don't know if anybody knows the answer.
Well,
to that.
Brett doesn't know because he
that
never
one.
studied TDS. I did the like, however, it's like 11 hours of video on YouTube. It's an amazing course. It's potato video quality.
Yeah.
It's from 2001.
Yeah.
But it's great. I'd hit a total funk with learning CRV. I was trying to learn CRV from the military manual, and I just hit a wall and started missing everything. And I took a break, and then came back and did the TD. And like, I went to TDS school. I spent all day at it. I tried to go to the class as best as I could. I did all the targets. I did all the exercises, whatever. So in terms of the Venn diagram, it's probably about 85% overlap.
Okay.
I mean,
could I
the attitude is different. I mean, yeah, John is piping up. You really want to ask John Knowles because he was
Sure.
there and he knows what the hell he's talking about. I don't.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I don't know if I would put the figure 80 to 85% on it. Russell, somebody asked about the overlap between TDS and CRV. For those who aren't aware, Prue learned the SRV Courtney system first, and then she left Farsight and found that SRV was not working for her. In fact, she was in tears, she said. So she devised some changes to SRV, which of course is different from CRV. And I wouldn't say that there's certainly a lot in the approach. It has stages, but we do things in a different order. We do different numbers. We do scans, we call them. I'm not sure why you would want to overlap exactly, but so let me ask you that, Rich, why the overlap? What's important about that? Maybe I'm missing something.
I don't know if it's important. I just know CRV has become, obviously like the standard, right? And so everything else is kind of just branched off of it. So I was just curious how my training, how it might have differed from like the CRV core concepts.
Well, the scans at the beginning of a TDS session are CRV stage 1 to 3 repeated 3 times with a slightly different stage 1 that's got a bit of stage 2 mixed into it, I guess you could say. It's got a topography element, which I believe comes from SRV.
Okay.
I haven't studied SRV.
Also, there is a initial transit to the target where you sometimes.
Oh, the transit line, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a cool exercise.
Sometimes in CRV, advanced perception, and then
there are also larger changes, really.
Right.
Harking back to what Russell was saying earlier, you have to bear in mind as well that when Ingo originally devised CRV, he devised it that the training had to be a minimum of 2 years, very intensive training. No other method out there is pretty much, putting that down as the absolute standard.
Gotcha.
He was adamant that you had to do it, and when they interfered with that, this is in the documents and stuff. There, he had altercations and he resigned and all kinds of stuff. So he was adamant. No one interfered. It was a 2-year process, and it was very, very intense. No one was allowed to interfere with the neural pathways he felt he was creating over that very long, extended period of time.
Yeah, but then as you know,
sense.
later on in the correspondence, Ingo says there are ways to teach it in a shorter form than the original months and months. And
I think that was a different method. I don't think that was CRV was referring to.
I think this correspondence refers explicitly to the CRV as well as other, but there was the other methods too around holograms and so forth that he thought he could develop.
Yes.
But also just back on Prue, she also favored a very intensive program, back to the original point you guys were discussing about should stick with one. I mean, we had a very rigorous, I'd say 6 to 8 months every day doing sessions, monitored and unmonitored. And I certainly support that view that if you can really get intensive training, by all means get it. It was invaluable to have that. And as to the differences, again, just to finish out that thought, so the matrix is somewhat different, and there's a column for paraphysicals, which I always thought was a little strange because I don't get paraphysicals in the TDS, but they did get paraphysicals. And then there's other tools like Gingerbread Man and other stuff. So
Yes.
if you want, at some point, Rich, I could try to make a comparison, or perhaps we could do it together if that's interesting to you.
Oh, that'd be very interesting. Thank you, John. Yeah, let's do that sometime.
Okay.
Yeah, and John, and I've deferred to you many times online. Your TDS experience is invaluable in terms of active witness, that we can talk to. I finally got a copy of the TDS manual, and I've been watching the videos, and I see lots of interesting things there. There's no doubt about that. So your expertise and availability is appreciated on that topic.
Well, yeah, and I see that.
And on other topics.
That link there, Russell.
Specifically that one.
So. And
go ahead.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. I was gonna actually answer Fabian's question earlier too,
yes.
As it relates to me, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I was raised Christian. My father's actually a retired minister, and so my first girlfriend, she was an atheist, and so I was so concerned. As a good Christian, I was concerned about her soul, right? So I wanted to convert her to Christianity. So I started reading up on, all these books on atheism and atheist thought and everything. I thought if I could understand her mindset, I could logically draw her to the Christian conclusion. Well, it backfired and I became atheist. And so I immediately had a crisis of faith of just like, oh my God, everything is pointless and meaningless, right? And so I went into the big long journey of like, I just want to know that life extends, or consciousness, a spirit, something exists beyond death, right? So I tried all sorts of things like you, Fabian, like astral projection and stuff, and I'd get to the vibration stage and everything. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe, but it's still in my mind, right? And it doesn't prove anything. So I went ghost hunting, and I've seen full body apparitions and shadow people. But then it's like, okay, well, is that somebody's soul or spirit from a living person, or is it some creature from another dimension, or the devil playing tricks on you? All that stuff, right? You can't definitively tell. Lucid dreaming, right? So I've had lucid dreams where you can feel, taste, smell, and it's as real as this world. And so the idea is, okay, well, if my conscious mind can create something as real life, maybe real life is consciousness, but still that experience is all in my head so far, right? So remote viewing, I actually don't have an end game in mind, because for me, remote viewing is the end game. It was the first experience I've had where for myself, it proved to me that my consciousness can extend outside of my materialist brain. And that was the moment for me where I was like, okay, maybe we do survive after death. Whatever that means, maybe we don't. But at least in this capacity, consciousness, at least I've proved to myself that it can extend beyond just our meat computer. And so yeah, I don't really have an end game in mind. It's just I'm blown away by remote viewing because of what I've been able to do as a complete beginner. That just I'm convinced if people just like sat down and like, hey, do this in 2 hours, you're going to convince yourself that there's something to it. Yeah, I don't know. So that's just my experience.
Like we have a lot in common, because I was raised Catholic, and I don't want to offend anybody by saying anything weird, but as I started to experience more things, Catholicism seemed to fit less and less with reality for me. So not to offend anybody, that's just me. But yeah, when you start to see with a broader spectrum and you open your mind to other things, it's very difficult to remain in a box.
Yeah. Yep.
So great answer.
And Rich, was that feedback based? In other words, you got a number, you did a session, you saw the feedback, you knew that you knew, you had no idea what that number was connected to.
Yes.
Okay. And
it was not double blind. It was not double blind.
No, either way,
Yeah.
there was telepathy or
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, either telepathy or like actual remote viewing. But for me, it doesn't matter because
Right,
it's
so
like, yeah.
That puts three of us, you know, David coming from atheist, you coming from theist to atheist to, and me, you know, jumbled around. You know, it's feedback. It's tangible. You can see it, and when you know you didn't know what it was, and you found out that you were able to describe what it was, and that's what I try to tell people: just try it,
just do it.
See. One thing I want to address, kind of a thing that I was thinking about a minute ago. You know, people, they talk about structure, let's say being an imposition or free form or these things, which all arguments which I understand. But let's keep in mind something as simple as a Buddhist monastery. There's people all over just sitting around meditating and having experiences. If you don't think when you go to a Buddhist monastery that there isn't structure, we're talking, and it was jokingly mentioned, the bamboo stick, the citation of scripture over and over and over, and rake the sand, chop the wood, carry the water, keep your mouth shut. In other words, for them to have the container, the solid will and discipline and the acute discernment that gets developed with those types of practices, they wouldn't have the solidity or the stability, is a better word, to go into that free-form state. So it's not just remote viewing. Then you take a theology student and the rigidity of seminary. You take a PhD. So look at the people we admire. I'll throw out a couple. Say Rupert Sheldrake. Oh shoot, I can never pronounce his name, but he's the master of Vietnamese Buddhism. Thing something or another.
Is that the Thich Nhat Hanh?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, I love that. To me is my favorite form of Buddhism. If you and I had gone through what he had gone through in terms of structure and regimen for many, many, many years, we might have the same perception. So in other words, in the spiritual world, it's not a choice between free form or structure. I think the two are blended, and it's not just remote viewing that's operating under structure. You look at what these Rupert Sheldrake went through to get, say, his PhD. They all had free form. They all had thoughts. They all had ideals and dreams and things they wanted to know about, but they also all submitted themselves to some structure. We watch Kung Fu and say, oh, I'd love to be a Shaolin monk. Right. Until, like day 3, you run out of the facility and never want anything to do with it again, because it was so disciplined and so intense and so contrary even to natural impulses and instincts and beliefs. So remote viewing is not the only place applying structure toward the concept of realization.
I would like to add a little
Yes.
counterpoint on the topic of structure that is about creativity. Remote viewing data, in my eyes, comes from the same place as art and music and all creativity. And what is the artist without a canvas, right? You need a box to fill up. You need a space. And are we gonna paint? Are we gonna draw? What are the tools? You need to have something to put that into, some way for it to express itself. If it's like create a piece of art, but there's no medium, right? And that's what structure is, which could be you got a blank page and some charcoal or a pencil or a pen, but that's your structure if you're going to draw something.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have that, you just look around you like, how are you gonna, it's so much more easy to be creative and let that stuff flow from wherever it comes from if you've got a place to put it and a way to put it there. So it's not like constraining you, it's just being like, okay, here's the space we're going to fill up. Like it's not a negative thing. It's a helpful thing. It's making your job much easier. It's like making so many questions that you then don't have to answer, because you know you're drawing with pencil and you know you're drawing on this page. You got this much space. Here's your subject. That's your structure,
Yeah.
right?
No,
And
brilliant.
you're doing the job, but
Brilliantly stated.
There's a counterpoint to your counterpoint, which is
yeah,
that even within Buddhist traditions, there are more open practices where nobody's given implicit rules, but they're just put in situations where they can cultivate what they need for the next step of their progression. And so there's a Zen way of doing things, and there's a Theravadan way of doing things, and they're both very different. So we're kind of conflating things by saying exactly what happens in a Buddhist monastery, because there are multiple different ways in which somebody can become Buddhist and multiple different paths. So in the Zen tradition, somebody might be given a koan at one time.
I was referring specifically to that.
Supposed to meditate.
Gren, your audio's gone.
Oh yeah,
You're referring specifically to the one that I'm sorry.
Because in one of his
you were referring specifically to the side that. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're breaking up.
Gren,
So
your
I'm sorry.
audio is breaking up really
I
badly.
didn't know you were talking because you're breaking up. So see if you can tune in and finish what you were saying. See if you're talking right now, I can't hear anything. So I'll go on, and then if you kick back in, I'll be quiet.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yep.
Go ahead. No, we cannot now.
Okay, fellas.
We're literally getting 3-second bursts at the tops.
This isn't working.
Okay, I'll go on with and respond to the bit that I did here. In particular, I was referring to that instructor in specific Vietnamese Buddhism, because he explained clearly very well in one of his books the stages he had to go through. So in terms of, say, Hinduism, you have what's called the Satguru, who had a spontaneous realization without formalized training. So I honor both. I'm just talking about the people who've come with a product like a book or a video or something, or people mostly that we look up to are mentors. Very few of those, I can think of maybe one exception, but very few of those were absent some sort of structural enhancement. But you're absolutely right, Grin. There are those, gosh, I wish I could think of the one guy's name. But anyways, there are those who've had it spontaneously. There are, Ingo, if anybody understood the depth of regimen that he had to go through to reach the level in Scientology that he reached, most people would just say, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to. But yes, I agree 100%. You have spontaneous realizations, you have people who can articulate that effectively. I'm not trying to say there's one way for everybody. I'm just trying to say, is there a way that most of us can kind of walk a path? And the people I've looked at whose path I would be interested to walk because of their life product, most of them have some formalized something under their belt. And that's really all I'm trying to say.
And Russell, I like, I think it was Daniel Ingram. He wrote the book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha.
I'm not familiar with that.
I'd recommend that. That's a good book if you like Buddhist.
It's a really good book.
Opinions. Yeah, thank you. And but it stuck with me something that the author wrote, because he considers himself an arahant, so he's enlightened. So he said, it's perfectly capable of people that spontaneously will become enlightened. But if you practice what the Buddha taught and you do it methodically, he basically says that enlightenment is an accident. But if you follow the methodology, you become more and more accident prone.
Okay.
And you may have the, spontaneous thing then. So I kind of like that duality of it where, you can spontaneously do it. You can be great, and it applies to anything, or follow a methodology.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. My favorite practice is Vedanta. my primary practice, personal, is what one might have to call Gnosticism, and actually Stoicism. So those for me are very important things. But there's people who have no affinity for that, just like I have no affinity for sitting around making a bunch of sounds with incense and, hoping for something to happen. So it's just, it's there's so many different ways. I just think when one chooses a path, at least to a certain point, of self-stability or autonomy, because look, when you get out into some of these weirder spiritual realms, if you don't have a certain solidity and a certain discretion, and I mean just a balance of both, to think clearly, and even under some conditions just kind of hang on to maintain your focus. A lot of, I mean, there's more than one person that's kind of gone off the deep end into some of these things. And so just from personal experiences, I do suggest that you find this solid center within yourself and this discretion, because this, face appears in meditation, or this sound appears in meditation, or you get this feeling of being in space and suddenly feel kind of disoriented, maybe a little panicky. You've got to be able to keep your composure to function without the gravity of a body and that kind of thing. So there is some importance, especially if you get subjected to or subject yourself to. I mean, it's weird out there. It's not, cut and dry. You're going to hear, see, feel, and experience things that are at times unsettling. I mean, that's just honest. All right. So, Rich, are you satisfied with? Okay. David, you have your hand up again. Jump.
It's been up for a long time. I actually have a question for Fabian, because I'm not on Facebook, and therefore not in his group. I was wondering whether the experiment with seeing whether remote viewers can discern imaginary targets from photograph targets from physical object targets had gone any further since you last updated us on this, like a year ago or something.
That's a good question. I haven't assigned another target specifically on that. I have followed other people who've done the same thing. But when I did it myself, I was very pleased with the results. I can think of several people after I did that target, which was pretty good. I can tell you the results in a second there. I got messages more than a year later of people who worked that into their regular targets, the way they would practice. So they would do a lot of them are in CRB, and several of them got back to me later and said, I still add that to my probing. I ask, is it real, virtual, or imaginary? And some of them still use it to this day, and it seems to be working pretty well for them. When I did the target myself back, when I tasked it back then, what was interesting is how people try to determine if it's real or imaginary or virtual. Some people logic it out. So one of my virtual targets was a floating castle. And the person who was able to say that it was virtual said, well, it seems like a cube, and I'm able to rotate it as fast as I want. So I guess it feels like it's virtual. So there are some people who seem to be do a logic thing with it. And then there are other people who just probe for it the same way they would probe for hard, soft, that kind of stuff. So I haven't continued much with it myself, because I found that I always wanted to trick people and see. One of the things I tasked was, I'm a drone pilot. So I fly drones almost every day for a living. And so I figured, because so many people are used to doing UFO targets, I'm going to do a drone target and see how many people report a UFO versus how many people report something else. And one person got back to me saying, well, I sense a non-surface structure, but I can't get any kind of personality from it. Usually I could read a pilot, and I can't read them in this case. So I think that this has got to be a made-up target. So I was happy to trick them, but it was strange. So I have not done nearly enough testing on that to really say one way or another that you can really probe for it. I've only done 2 or 3 targets where I wanted people to choose real, imaginary, or virtual. So a lot more testing would need to be done so I can collect statistics on it.
It sounds like your feeling is that viewers can do it if they intuitively. Is it hard or soft? Is it real or fake?
Viewers can do anything. From what I'm seeing, from what I've seen, and I haven't been tasking all that long, but from what I've seen, people have wowed me every time. Every time I task a target, I go in as a non-believer. I expect no one's going to get the target this time. And so if I don't get any positive results, then okay, I was right. Nothing needed to be proven to me that this time. And I've now done 15 targets, and only 1 target that I tasked, I didn't get results that I could really follow. But 14 targets where multiple people have given me great results. It blows my mind. So I know that people can do anything. It's just a matter of what they believe they can do a lot of the time. Because one of the biggest problems I face as a tasker trying to get people to participate when they're afraid that they're going to be wrong. It has been a huge problem. There's a lot of confidence. Confidence is the biggest problem that I've seen, at least in my group. And so I try to say, okay, buddy, I'll hold your hand. It's okay if you miss this one or the next one. Everybody misses. So it's okay. And I won't share your results if they're wrong. So collecting all the data has been tough. But then there are times, like more recently, where I've got way too many people participating and they're all on target, so I can't share their results. So I've gone beyond what you were asking, but yes, I haven't gone back to the real, imaginary, or virtual. I think because of a conversation I had in this forum a number of months back with Courtney Brown. I spoke to him and Daz about how do you know when you're remote viewing something real or if it is possibly a hoax? How could you tell if something's a hoax? If somebody wanted to fake a UFO landing or whatever, how would you be able to tell? And the answers that were coming back, I guess they were all kind of asking me to look at things a little differently than that. You can redefine kind of what you mean as reality. And that goes into a whole nother topic that I could possibly talk for hours about, and you really shouldn't. So, but yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh.
No, I don't want to say anything about real, not real, and Courtney Brown in the same sentence.
Oh, yeah.
I have a question. This is...
Hold on 1 second, Ida. I wanted to ask David something, follow up, and then I'll come back to you. Can you put your hand up and remind me?
Okay, now I have to remember where to do that. Okay.
Okay, David, have you ever talked to Brett or had him describe to you what he calls a stage 4 overlay?
I don't think so, but maybe under a different name. What is?
Brett, do you want to jump in and describe stage 4 overlay where at a certain point you begin to detect even tasker's intention and maybe even nefarious intention?
I think I'm vaguely familiar with the...
Okay, he might not be there.
The idea,
all right,
yeah.
if he does, it's very interesting. So we'll put that on pause. And did you have anything more, David?
No, that was it.
Anybody want to throw
in wanting to ask Fabian that Paul Cosby's got his hand up.
Okay, I can't. Why? Oh,
there. Oh, you need to go to the next page.
Okay, so let me, Paul. I don't know how long your hand's up, but I'll just put you on quick standby. Ida, what is yours?
Oh, just real quick, Fabian, when you say real, you mean actually our four-dimensional aspects, physical reality and time, correct?
Yes, which is pretty broad, I've learned.
Okay, and when you say virtual, you mean?
Computer generated. So a very specific kind of imagination, something that can be verified by looking at it on a computer. I'm talking about like video game avatars, virtual landscapes, things like that.
Okay, would that include photoshopping, creating a photo of, oh, I don't know, you shaking hands with Abraham Lincoln?
That is a fantastic question. Wow, that's a good question because that's a mix of virtual and actual reality. So that there goes one of those things that I didn't quite control for. When I was tasking these things, I was very specifically creating something that was virtual or purely created in my own imagination that I never even wrote down, versus something as solid as my glass of water. So I wanted to start with very basic things first that I had 100% feedback on. So your Photoshop example is a great example of something that would be very confusing that I didn't go quite that far. But okay, what I will add is that in one of the virtual targets, I mentioned video game avatars. What's interesting is that a virtual avatar in a virtual environment that is being controlled by a real life person, one of the questions I was curious about is, can a remote viewer that is given the target of looking at two avatars that are being controlled by two real people, can a remote viewer pick up on the real person's, the real people's personalities and what they're actually thinking and talking about in the virtual space? And amazingly enough, they could. So I was representing one of the virtual avatars and a friend of mine was the other. I just assigned a picture of it and I had taskers that were able to probe me through the avatar. So that was a fascinating mix of worlds.
I would like to very quickly chime in here and say I've been tasked with actually a TDS gingerbread man target of just taking somebody to bits, read their mind, do all the works, and see what's going on. And the tasking was just their username on a video game that I've never played before. I didn't have an image, it was nothing, and I nailed it to the wall. It's just intent. It's magic. I don't know how it works, but yeah.
Okay, and finally, here we go. Imaginary as opposed to virtual, or the combination of you shaking hands with Abraham Lincoln. Okay, I'm really good on real, except that my real is also influenced by Avatar, where it was like, go out in the rain for 30 minutes when it's 39 degrees and walk around and find, I don't know, in this case, it was in Dallas, Texas, find a mushroom and feel what the mushroom is feeling. And if you didn't think I didn't have my timer set on my watch because it was pouring down rain in Dallas and I'm out, why am I interested in this mushroom? I paid a lot of money and I'm out here in the rain feeling a mushroom. Okay. And at that time, the concept of feeling a mushroom was, way outside my wheelhouse, as I would say. But so what is imaginary to you?
Imaginary doesn't necessarily have a real world counterpart yet. For me, imaginary can be, wow, in a situation, if I wanted to create something as a target, then I might go into my mind and come up, say, oh, you know, a great thing for this might be, I'm a filmmaker, writer, I have a lot of artistic outlets. So something imaginary for me would be, say I wanted to take a mythological creature, like a centaur or any of those, and give it the personality that I want to give it for a movie I'm about to make. So I want to make him really mean, really tough. He's a former warrior, give him a whole backstory, but only create all of this within my own mind. So imaginary for me would be something that I haven't even written it down yet. Once I write it down into the script, then it becomes something more than imaginary. It's now in the form of a script. So imaginary would be this character that has a physiological look and feel. You know, it's a centaur, and it has the personality that I've given it, but I haven't done anything with it outside of my mind. I haven't even told anyone about it. That would be my definition for imaginary at this point.
Okay.
Also, I just posted an article in chat. It's an Abe Martini's article, Daz and Deborah, from 2012. It's called Remote Viewing Consciousness Targets. And it's a really nice address of this topic: fantasy, target, imagination, etc. All right, Ida, do you feel satisfied?
Right. I just have one comment to the person who was talking about art. Like, what do you do if you want to make art and you don't have any tools? Once again, retired psychotherapist here. I specialized as an admin for dementia care. And if this is going to offend anyone, I apologize ahead of time. We had a wide variety of, these were people who had been high level in whatever their fields were. And so these were called discrete placements. And this was back in the 80s and 90s when nobody talked about these issues. Let me tell you about artists. If there's a blank wall, they will collect materials to use, ranging from the carrots that were left over from lunch that they hid in a pocket to, you guessed it, urine and feces. And
Well,
they
what about
will
blood?
make art.
It was me talking about the canvas, but I mean, there they've created a canvas from the wall, right?
The
That
wall,
you
or
need a
in those
medium.
days, we had these huge mirrored walls, which you definitely don't want with people who have some aspects of some types of dementia, because, you know, they'd go up there and punch the mirror or scream at it, getting into an argument with the woman who wouldn't move out of the way. But I mean, they would make art. There was no, because that creativity.
My point was really that it makes it much easier, right? So if I give you a pen and a piece of paper and say, draw me a picture, or if I give you nothing at all and say, draw me a picture, now you've got to go put carrots in your pockets and
Exactly.
collect feces or do whatever.
Exactly. And I mean, they figured that out. I mean, most of them were in, you know, they were incontinent, and they figured it out because we had one woman who had retired. I don't know how she did it. Her family maintained her pilot's license. She was a woman who was like 80 years old. And she had a full, I mean, I don't know whether she'd gotten it in the military. She'd been one of the, what were they called? The women that ferried the airplanes around. But she would draw airplanes. I mean, we had, you know, we were continually cleaning and painting walls, but never underestimate creativity. Okay.
I'm not underestimating creativity. I'm just saying it's easier to be creative when you've got a space to fill rather than having to make your own space. You know, the structure in CRV or any other RV methodology it makes it just I mean, it's not forced choice, of course, but it makes it a little bit more like a multiple choice exam rather than a free form thing. You know, it gives you boundaries to work within, so you're not wondering, you know, how big is the piece of art that I'm supposed to produce? how far am I supposed to go here? It stops you second guessing yourself or analyzing the creative process, because what you're going to do is clearly defined from the outset, so you can just get into your flow and just do it and just go, and you're not going, can I go around the corner onto the next wall? Because it's like, no, you can't. You just stay on this wall and get your feces and draw your aeroplane or your carrot.
Okay, well, control is never a word we used in dementia management. In those, so, but I'm just saying, when you said that, I immediately thought back to several patients and their
I mean, creativity will come out.
Yeah, it's definitely in that.
Regardless of how you try to stop it, right?
Yeah, I always wonder. Russell talked about when you need good grounding, because when you get out there on some of these aspects, well, he didn't use the word grounding. I'm using the word grounding. He used another word, centering, I believe. But when you get out there at that precipice, what some people would say is a precipice, I mean, I've seen what happens when people go beyond that, and yeah, I think centering or grounding or whatever word we want to use is essential in this type of work.
I agree. Okay. Now we are going to acknowledge Paul Cosby, who's been the world record holder for patience. Paul, come on, and what's your question or comment or whatever?
Yeah, hi, Russell. You had asked a while back about what the end game was. I know the discussion's moved on since then.
Oh no, it's great.
Are you okay if I make any comments to that?
Oh, absolutely, unconditionally, go for it.
Okay. Well, I had two comments, one personal, one general. Personal comment was by my nature, I'm kind of a loner and a very solidly left brain rooted person, and my job, which was in the medical field, had for decades just reinforced that very, very strongly. So the benefit that I've seen from remote viewing has been personal. I was fortunate enough to be able to take an ARV training class with Brett Stewart, something which I highly recommend. And it really opened, I had a lot of trouble at the beginning, and then I had a kind of like a breakthrough and since then I've had just literally dozens of 100% accurate hits. I wasn't able to accomplish all of the things that Brett was hoping for, but from my perspective, I accomplished what I want. And I've had a number of people, many people actually tell me that since my right brain has had some degree of opening, that I'm just a totally different person, that, I'm just not the same person. So I think there's, for me, that's potentially my end game, is to just change my whole life. And for that, I thank Brett. Thank you very much, Brett, sir. The other comment I had was a general comment, and that is, in the medical field, there's a procedure called nuclear medicine. And what that does is you inject a radioactive tracer, and then an imaging is taken of the part of the body. This is, most people probably today would relate that to a cardiac stress test, where they take a picture of the heart after the treadmill is over. And in medicine, we don't call it nuclear medicine, we call it unclear medicine. We reverse it to the first two letters, because the images you get are fuzzy. And I've heard many people say that that's exactly what they get with remote viewing, is that they don't get crystal clear imaging. If you get that, that's probably not remote viewing. It's probably AOL of some form. And so, we're dealing with unclear imaging, and I mean, the fact that you can even do that by itself is just incredible. But do we really want to have CAT scan clear imaging? I'm told that Ingo had developed CRV up to stage 18, but he was only willing to reveal that, I'm told, up to stage 10 to a very, very select few people. And publicly, we're only trained up to stage 7. And there's probably a good reason for that, because if you've got the incredible range of up to stage 18, there's absolutely no limit to within the powers of the mind of what you could do. Do you want to turn a machine gun over to a 6-year-old? I mean, are we spiritually ready for that? I mean, maybe the end game is exactly where it should be right now. We're dealing with, you don't want to turn loose the knowledge onto a world. If you just look at the history of the world, of all the horrible things, do you want to give people even more power than they've had in the past to be able to do worse things? So the end game perhaps may never be achieved for many, many, many centuries until we are able to deal with that in a way that's not harmful to others. Those are my comments.
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge the sincerity I can hear in your voice regarding this urge to move from a linear, left brain modality and the changes that people have noticed in you. I mean, that's very profound. I could feel it. What have you noticed in yourself? What's your introspection on this? And does feeling more of that other aspect of previously ignored of yourself, does it bring you relief? Does it bring you relaxation? Are you seeing the world differently? What's your subjective experience with that?
Well, I think self-analysis is probably not something that we could ever do accurately, but I would just say I'm just not hard-boiled anymore. Like I was an ER doctor for decades, for 30 years. And, you run into an ER, you hit the deck running for 12, 14 hours, and you never caught up, and it's life and death, and it's very high stress. And the last thing you want to do is, have somebody come up and say, I'm listless, and then sit down and talk to them for a half hour to find out what's bothering them. It's much easier if they come and say, I have chest pain, or I can't move my left arm, or something like that. I have a headache. That's so it's just not hard boiled anymore.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. I spent a lot of time in the Harborview emergency room for various reasons, training, also bringing patients in from downtown Seattle during my time there with the Seattle Fire Department. And I remember we would approach a scene out in the field, and times we would have actually the interns with us, ER interns, so that they could see what happened in the field, and then the process to bring the person to them in the ER itself. And more than one that I was assisting or was riding along with us, when they got into the chaos of the field, the emotion, the crying, the this, that, the uncontrolled situation, they clearly described how many times that was extremely uncomfortable. Then you go to the ER, everything's labeled, the covers this, you know where it's at, you've got your head surgeon or head attendant, the support of informed people like nurses, and they liked that controlled environment a lot more. And so as soon as you said that, I just went through like 10 years of Harborview emergency room, and I completely get what you just said. Are you there?
So in that way, the structure makes it easier, right?
Oh, there you go. You brought it back to topic. I would just kind of floated off there. I really admired what he said, and the treachery that he probably saw over the years is hard for people to understand. So anyway,
well, the thing I wanted to mention, to emphasize, was that do we really want to have complete mastery of remote viewing to the same degree that Ingo did, if we're not spiritually able to handle that in a positive manner? I mean, maybe there's a time for that in the future, but maybe we're doing the best we can right now.
Yeah, and I don't want to go off topic or controvert with your current, but there's been a fair amount, and actually I'll say a substantial amount of research done with multiple people involved on these extra stages, and there's going to be some information forthcoming, and we might find that this notion is a little different. But let's say regardless of that, I consider, and I think there's some validity to this, that a certain type of ethics, and I don't know what they are, may be a key criteria before some of those doors open as people expand or ascend. It might be that, I mean, obviously at certain levels, there's people misusing abilities. I'm not going to question that. But I think if it came to large scale detriment, there's possibly that implied criteria of some sort, whatever the most amount of good for the most amount of beings for the most amount of time ethics are, that somebody won't be overly empowered beyond that, just as a theory.
I would like to agree with that. You said what I wanted to say was that if you won't be allowed, if you like, allowed implies somebody's going to allow you, which I don't want to imply, but
yeah,
you just can't, unless you've reached a certain level of personal development, you just can't do it.
Yeah, I agree with
that. Applies to a lot of stuff that's not remote viewing.
Ed Dames told a real powerful story to our class regarding that. I won't go into it, but ultimately he saw a person achieve a goal using remote viewing and specifically sports betting. Then instead of quitting when they had achieved the goal, they decided to go on more to a gratuitous accumulation of funds, so to speak. And Ed said he saw an uncanny, improbable streak of misses. And that was the very first time he started to wonder, does the matrix, as we call it, have a filter on it? He seemed to be convinced that it did. So if it's going to be overly detrimental to ourselves or others, it's possible that we just simply won't be permitted the knowledge.
I mean, you could say is that, okay, actually, no, I don't want to say is that externalizing it as if that's wrong. I don't mean to imply that, but another perspective on that is that he didn't want that, right? You know, it's not that the matrix has a filter, it's that just, you know, his real true will that he wasn't aware of was like, no, that's enough. That's not where you're going personally.
No, and self-inhibition, I mean, that is demonstrable even down to the tangible level. So no, that's a good point. I just remember him kind of looking up and reminiscing when he was telling the story. It had an impact on Ed Dames that he was like, but absolutely, it could have been a personal inhibition. You know, I mean, if we have
I know we all have inhibitions about winning the lottery, apparently.
Yeah, well, I'd still like to give it a shot, but all right. So Paul, is there anything else you want to say, or did that answer the hand up?
Yeah, I was just wanted to discuss your question about the end game. That was all.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And the impact, like I said, I could hear it in your voice, and whatever this integration or this adding the right brain to your mix, I hope it's really satisfying, and whatever goals derive out of that, or as you go to the future, always jump in here. You say you're perhaps a little bit introverted, but don't be inhibited. This is free flow with no structure conversation, and have fun and share everything, because it truly benefits us all.
I think RV has changed my life, and I very much appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you being here, and like I said, never inhibit, and it's always okay. I do apologize for overlooking your hand up there because you weren't up on the camera screen. All right, so let's think about moving towards a winding down process. We're 2.5 hours in, so let's give another, natural until we kind of wind down, 15-20 minutes. Is there something that has been triggered by the conversation? Is there anybody holding something back and you're afraid to come out and speak of it? Anything? Let's just plop it out here and wind down towards a close.
I think I was a little triggered by that last conversation discussing abilities and I guess general populations. Paul's situation where remote viewing helped him to come out and open up and experience more, it makes me think of your end game, how you kind of, I think the way you kind of put it was, you wanted people to kind of put aside their stupid. There's a lot of delusion. I think you might have said delusion. A lot of people are delusional. Sometimes delusions are what make a person who they are as an individual. But no, I guess what triggered me was thinking, gosh, you know, the people in this group, for the most part, we are developing ourselves. We're thoughtful people, we're analytical, and we're fascinated by knowledge and exploration. And when I think about the population outside of our group, the people who are, gosh, I don't have many nice words for a lot of people in the world. I worry if abilities like this were in the hands of people who emotionally and in terms of maturity, how many people could handle it? I know, you know, another one of the groups outside of remote viewing that has caught my attention that I'm sure a lot of people in here are familiar with CE5 techniques and things like that. I watched an interview, I think just on YouTube, of a bunch of guys who seemed like college frat house boys had their own podcasts. And they were doing an interview with Dr. Stephen Greer. And so Dr. Greer is talking to them about these extraterrestrials that he hopes to meet and make friends with. And the guys sitting across from him go, whoa, you think these Martian ladies will sleep with us? Are they hot? So they went in that direction. And I eventually had to turn off the video because it frightens me what happens when things are put in the hands of the general public. So it might just be me. I know there are a lot of people who want disclosure of various things. I'll go away from UFOs and aliens for a bit because this goes far beyond UFOs and aliens. In the general public, the internet even, the internet was a great idea. It brings people together and information is available and readily there at your fingertips. And then there are people who use the internet for very horrific means, from everything from just stealing things, taking other people's money, breaking into their accounts. You can hack into anything. And then there's a dark web where you can sell organs and people. So when you have highly developed skill sets that people like us find fascinating and see as a way of evolving, ascending, as you said earlier, there are those of us that would choose to ascend, and then there are many that would choose the opposite, and would absolutely use this to do something incredibly greedy that people like us just wouldn't get. We wouldn't understand it because it's not natural to our way of thinking. Mm-hmm. But then what percentage of the population would use it to destroy?
Yeah.
I would definitely like to pop in on that one. Because I think you can't, when you do the stuff that we do, and you have the kinds of perceptions that we experience when we're doing this stuff, you can't understand those or conceptualize them in any kind of meaningful way without your worldview being kind of a certain way, not necessarily one way, but there's many ways that, you know, I can't be a remote viewer and believe that physical reality is the only reality. You know, it's impossible because otherwise this is impossible, but I do something impossible from within that worldview. You know, like it forces you, and the more you do this, the weirder you get. Not weirder, you know what I mean though. Your reality box expands, right? You you come to accept some pretty wild ideas because you have firsthand experience of it. So, I mean, yeah, maybe the frat boys can win some sports ARV, but they're not going to be doing advanced stuff unless they work on themselves, you know, and they will have to, and they'll go, oh, I really want to win that money. I want the money. So I will do whatever this teacher says. I'm going to do all the steps on this website, and they'll do it. And it will blow their fucking mind right, excuse my French, right open. And they'll be like, oh, I don't want the money anymore. And I'm really sorry that I was such a misogynist. Oh, I see things differently now, you know? And it's like the bait and switch.
That's a very good point. There will be a percentage of the population like that. But now to take it in a darker direction, let's compare this to Star Wars, where you have the light side and the dark side. Now, so your frat boys can eventually go on over to the light side once they become enlightened. But what about the people who absolutely do understand and believe in that remote viewing works? And you don't have to believe remote viewing works, because statistics and science are right there to say.
Or you could be an asshole and just pay remote viewers. You don't have to develop yourself.
Exactly.
Get other people to do it for you.
But then there are the people who would develop this ability specifically because if they have some kind of a masochistic, sadistic craving where they want to spy, go beyond spying. What if somebody wanted to develop these abilities specifically? Say, imagine an assassin who wanted to not have to leave his or her house to do their job. If they could remote view their target and then remote influence or remote view or remote
allegedly this happens already.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm touching on people who would
but the world is okay, right?
One thing back to when you said certain aspects triggered, when I was referring to delusion and madness, I was as much self-referring. So in processes with gurus and what have you, they get you to realize your own nonsense. Now, collective delusion, mass hysteria, these other things have their place in psychology / science. I think some of that phenomena is very valid. In my both personal and substantially researched over many decades encounter with ET, there appear to be certain beings of a very high level of ability. Ingo even tended to distinguish between Earthside telepathy and their telepathy plus, as he put it, in penetration. So I'm not saying there's an absolute filter on malicious intent, but what seems to be is either the limitation or the eventual kickback on any being who's perpetually malevolent. It kind of tends at some point to not be worth it. And so whatever length beings who want to operate in that manner have to go until they hit whatever wall it is they hit, so be it. And that's where, I do emphasize belief. Okay, I can't put a handful of source out here and say, there you go, but I do, and it just makes sense that there's an origination of things and stuff. And like you say, maybe we are emanations of the same awareness, and we end up in an individual unit of mental energy that then connects to an individual physical body, so all of that stuff. Yeah, heck yeah, if I knew all that stuff, I'd be writing books and you guys would be buying it.
Taking it back to being grounded, people are monumental assholes to each other without psychic abilities or magic abilities.
Yeah.
Through some mechanism or another, and we all have our own worldviews and whatever, but they will learn eventually, like it. None of us are perfect. We're all flawed human beings, right? We're not 100% perfect. So, how perfect do you have to be that it's acceptable to have these abilities? Do we have to be 90% perfect? What about 50%? I mean, I wouldn't give myself that much credit, you know. I haven't abused the powers that I've got very much, but I have regretted using them, and I've learned from it.
Yeah.
You know, and like, but some people could abuse them and it'll take ages for them to learn from it, but they'll still do it. And like, people suffer, people will die, regardless of whether psychic abilities are involved. You know, is it not just another layer to the overall game that's going on? I mean, bad people can do this.
Well, I give you
confident of that.
a high 49.5% on the perfect scale. So right in your.
You're never going to give yourself a 50.
But the one thing too, and this is an exceptional point. One of the most life-changing experiences for me was 10 years of being a firefighter and an emergency medical technician in downtown Seattle. You know, I can't even describe the brutality that I witnessed. There's still things that make me gag and things that make my eyes tear up. It was so much for me. I was one of the very rare people that didn't go on in that career to retire. And all the other guys are like, man, you shouldn't let it bother you so much. I said, I'm going home and I can't help but to think, how could you even conceive of doing these, particular things? And I think you brought up another good point, a person that's limited on disability. Okay, the history, they pick up a stick. Well, then they sharpen the stick, and then they put a rock on the stick, and then they figure out how to launch the rock, and then pretty soon you've got nuclear weapons. So they'll find a way to expand their effect if they're lacking that. So that's an exceptional point. And to your point, things just like, sitting out at night and listening to raccoons or cats fight. I think that's just so unnecessary. Why did the universe have to be this way in and of itself? Raccoons tearing each other apart when there's plenty of food for everybody, what have you. So, I mean, I'm particularly sensitive to that kind of thing too. And I would love to see, like I say, and I don't care what method. If somebody said, put your right finger in your ear and spin around 3 times and you'll be enlightened. I don't care how it happens. I would just like to see us get up out of our collective craziness and self-harm and then harm to others. That's kind of the context. So whatever triggered, I hope I didn't contribute to that.
So you learned a really valuable lesson from your horrible experiences, right?
Well,
so
yes,
they weren't, in that sense, they weren't 100% negative.
Correct. Absolutely.
It's very hard for things to be completely evil, right? And it's
right.
all just
in by the time you do those reciprocal layers, like you're pointing out. So was it entirely negative, or was that spiritual being undergoing a lesson that was perpetuated by them for a good reason? Those are the things I couldn't possibly put a finger on. I'm just saying the tangible, the smell, the sights, the the visceral experience at the street level, but then again, I did eventually, like you said,
check you out now. Check out the insight you've got and where it's led you, having that exposure.
I might have been 25 or 30,000 hours of therapy, but anyway.
So hey, and where's that got you?
I appreciate what you said, because it is perceived and definitely feels like a negative, but in retrospect, the saying I love that I got, it said, I wouldn't pay you a dime to do it again, but I wouldn't trade the experience for $1 million. And that in the end is value and is positive. And then hopefully myself or other people that have gone through that can extrapolate it out to others. So it might end up being a net good. I can't say. I wish I could.
You guys answered that that concern I had beautifully. David, those were very fair answers. It's not necessarily about being light side, dark side. It's, I guess it is a matter of growth. And there's a lot of fear in that. So, what I brought up about worrying about disclosing certain abilities and things to the general public is definitely on my part of not trusting. Because, you know, we've all had experiences where we want to protect ourselves because we've been wronged in some way. And the idea that somebody could have enough power to wrong me in a supernatural way is very frightening. And so I wanted to voice that concern, though what you have both said now about learning from that negative, it doesn't necessarily mean not everyone should have access to the information. I think that is where it comes to disclosure of, be it abilities or knowledge. What we don't like is when we have a government that tells us we're not allowed to know something. And maybe they're saying you're not allowed to know it specifically because they know about the meatheads and they know about the supremacists of some nationalistic group over here. They know about these and they've made up their minds for all of us. And that stops all of us from growing and learning.
The rules only apply to you when they are applied to you.
Yes.
It's not illegal unless you get caught, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So you have a very fair philosophy on that, and it is the correct philosophy in my mind to have. And you know, I
wouldn't give it that much credit. It's my working theory, right? Can I tell a silly woo-woo story, seeing as it's getting late in the evening? That I was struggling with the problem of evil, you know, the general philosophical problem of evil. I can't remember what had been going on, but I was writing in my magic journal about like how I did this, and I was suffering internally, and I had the just up there. Hang on, I can up there. That is the attic hatch in my office, right? And I had it open because it was summer. It was too hot, and it lets the hot air go up, and it kind of like cools the room down a little bit. And a woodlouse, which I don't know what that is in US English, but it's like a little crustacean thing. It's a little bug. Fell, like insects had been falling out of that thing onto my magic journal while I was writing it. They don't usually do that, but then this woodlouse fell onto the page like 2 inches away from where I'm writing. And I'm like, fine, I'll Google it, because I know if I don't Google it, more woodlice will fall out of the fucking roof. Fine. I found this thing that is the Sermon of the Woodlouse. It's he's a Christian priest of some description. He might even be Church of England, but he's giving a speech to a girls' school. And he starts it off like, how am I going to make this interesting to a bunch of teenage girls? And it was like he went to put a log on his fire, and he didn't want to kill the little woodlouse that was in there, but it was too late, you know, and the insect went pop, and he's like, I did what I could, and one can't avoid killing. And he goes into this whole great thing about the problem of evil. And the conclusion is evil is good, but it's not evil. It leads to, I mean, Google the Sermon of the Woodlouse and meditate upon it, but it leads to good. It is impossible to be evil. We can't not be good. Even though it looks evil, people do horrendous things, people get hurt, people die. We learn, we grow. Everybody eventually gets there if you take a view that is not, you know, this, when I die, it will be gone. You know, the ego, the body, David will be gone, but the lessons will remain, the progress, the developments, the end game, the return to source will be there, right? And you can't, if I go out and I beat somebody up really badly and I kill them, you know, that's not evil. It's evil from the egoic point of view of identity, because my identity doesn't like being locked up in prison for the rest of my life, and the person I killed doesn't like being dead. But in the grander scheme of things, if we take this, we're all God, we're all aspects of the same consciousness view, it's impossible for there to be evil, even though it's horrible for us sometimes when we're here experiencing it. And then if we're lucky enough to be alive afterwards, we pick up the pieces and we learn from it and we move on, and it doesn't happen to us again. And now I'm talking bollocks, and I shall stop. But
well, one thing I would like to suggest, David, is, you know, you're always putting out this really lighthearted stuff. Try to deepen the conversation a little for us. says.
Yeah, well, I thought I would just end with something lighthearted because it's getting late, right?
Yeah, no, it was
Well, that was very beautifully
okay.
put.
Yes, it was. And I will look up that statement. All right, so we're at T minus 6 minutes, which will put us at 3 hours, which has been a wonderful 3 hours. I think every single person that's participated. So Kiao, I know you want to say something. And normally you have maybe 2, 3, 4. One time I think I saw you with 6 questions. So I want you to look at that list and I want you to pick the primary closing exit topic with grandiose fireworks that we can all.
Russell, on the topic of evil not existing, if we go over time a little bit, is it really bad?
I think I'll remote view it and get back to you. So, all right. So did you pick a singular grand finale topic?
Yeah, and it is way out in left field as a last comment. But I took the Gateway program with Monroe Institute to get better at remote viewing. And I really, at that time, it didn't really affect my RV, but I learned all kinds of states of consciousness things. So these days, my RV teacher told me, try tasking at night before you go to bed 4 RV sessions so that when you wake up in the morning, you can document the info. I have been keeping a dream diary for a long time, so I know the difference between conscious thinking, this state we are in now, and the fantasy reality of dreams where these narratives and crazy things are happening. Last night, I had this one little moment. I don't know if it was 20 minutes, how long it lasted, but unfortunately, I don't know how to get there again, but it was just fascinating in the introspection sense of Ingo Swann, and that I was here, my mind's here, my thoughts are here, and then my perception was here, and I was looking at each thought, and with precision, in a calm, relaxed, detailed way, I could see every single one of my thoughts that were appearing, because of course the theory is you have millions, but I can see them all one by one as they're coming in, and then I could see the connection where they came from, what their motivation was, and what they were doing. And the fascinating part is I knew some were coming from the psychic world and some were, what you guys always say, left brain, right brain. So I could tell the difference between, oh, this is psychic information. This is coming from my logical mind or whatever. And I'm mentioning it now because I know for sure it was real. And I don't know how to get back to that state, but it seems to me that that is similar to what I've kind of seen or heard of Ingo at times. And I'm not comparing myself to Ingo. I'm nowhere near there. But just that I've got that glimpse to see that this exists is fascinating, because that to me, it would be like, the Holy Grail. If you could get there and stay there for half an hour, you can get whatever information you want. So that's my last comment. Thanks.
Try to remember what that feeling of knowing which ones come from the left brain and which ones from elsewhere is, because that's AOL. That's your AOL detector.
Yeah, I'm very, very familiar with the theory, but I think I would need to go to sleep, stay asleep for 5 hours, and magically have some spirit wake me up at that time. In other words, I've practiced a lot of the levels. Oh, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying Ingo got to where he did through thousands and thousands of experiments and analysis of that. And
he did an inhuman amount of experiments. He did insane numbers, but
yeah. And so to get a brief look at it was very, very, very nice, because it's a message. It's a clear message that with that ability, I can win the lottery, or it is possible to get to
if
that
you'll
level
allow yourself to
without hurting yourself.
Okay, so now we're going to put David's theory to the test, because this answer might go a minute or two over. So you guys will decide if it's good or evil. So have you read Resurrecting the Mysterious yet? Okay. Ingo would call that state the second exterior state. He trained very hard for that in Scientology. And so the first level, in some of his letters, he actually even requested that people use the term that he had used instead of replacing it, which was exteriorize. So there's a point where you exteriorize from your body, and there's a point where you exteriorize from your mental energy body. Now, in the type of training that I've done with people, I've seen several people achieve this, and they're quite stunned when they see their own astral body or mental energy body out in front of them. So if you, like there's one guru that currently has a little thing before you go to sleep to do a thing where you on the inhalation, you say, I am not my body. And on the exhalation, you say, I am not my mind. And he teaches that as that ability to get that distance. So from this position of what have you, it appears that we create a mental energy body, get overly identified with it and mistakenly think I am that. And then, so that's like putting on your long johns. And then the next iteration is like putting on your outer clothes or a physical body, either human or of whatever other variety. So the only reason I'm saying this is to validate your experience. It's something that I've seen multiple times with my clients. When you say, and this is that irony that I still to this day despise, I want to get in that state again. It's like, I'm going to try to go to sleep. It just, there's that, I don't even know what the dichotomy of wishing it, but not wanting it to. And I think whoever just spoke, David, remembering that sensation in that state, that's the fastest way to duplicate it. Because it's a continuous state. It's always already. And by remembering the last time you were in it, you take. So if you just want to try that, just dwell on remember. Oh man, that was so cool, and that is what I have found both for myself and others to re-achieve that. Now the fact is that you're always already there. You've never left that place. It's just once you lock your perception into a mental energy body, that's what travels around and we have these experiences. But then you take the second step, put on your physical suit. Now you're double identified and kind of in a certain way, double bind, like those Asian finger traps. So just try a semblance of what David said. Just recall the state and savor it, because that state's always there. You've never actually been out of it except for perceptually. And there you go. Dang it, 2 minutes. So was that good or evil? David? You're silenced.
Well, that's okay. The sound doesn't exist either, but evil certainly doesn't. So I'm sure that was great.
Okay, excellent. Is there anything that really needs to be said or done before we say see you later to each other? Okay, I'm going to say these talks, the more we go, the more we get to know each other, the more we feel comfortable bringing out what have you. These just get better and better and better. And that always comes back to Daz for coming up with this idea for the lockdowns, how it's evolved, his sharing of it, the bringing of people, the guests that he finds, and all these things. So Daz, once again, thank you. I'm honored that you let me do this. And I truly love everybody's thoughts and ideas. And David, one day I think I might strike up a business deal with you where I'll say what I'm saying, and then you add layers to it that I forgot to say. Might be like Penn and Teller, something like that, okay? Because you really do. It's like that shot through my head, but you spot those things and bring them out, and that's
the trick is to lose track of the conversation about 5% of the way through, and then to bring it back to the bit you remembered at the beginning.
Who are you again?
What?
Who are you again?
I don't know.
I just lost track and nothing happened.
Well, you know the answer to that question.
All right.
Let's not get too metaphysical.
Yeah, that's right. We got to stay lighthearted. I forgot.
You can't get more lighthearted than that. Come on.
Oh,
I say thank you to you guys. Thank you. This is the fun part of my day, when I get to talk to people about cool stuff like this. Otherwise, it's very normal here. I really need an escape from the usual, and Friday nights are something to look forward to whenever I can make it. So thank you guys for existing. That's all
I second that.
Yes.
This is great. Like, how often do we get to talk to this many remote viewers, right? It's
yeah.
Okay.
We're a small number of people, and it's hard to find people as weird as us.
That's a fact.
Yes, certainly
I've
is.
lived my whole life. I've lived my entire life, so I know that I'm happy to be in this group. It's been good to be here.
It definitely makes me feel less crazy, so that's awesome. All
We're
right,
just
you guys.
validating each other's craziness. Oh, hey, girl.
I'm going to go ahead and push the end button. Thank you, everybody. Daz, I'll upload this to Dropbox and send you the link.
See you all later.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, thanks, Russell. Thanks, Daz. Good night.